Good evening, everyone, and our apologies for arriving just a few minutes late. Our earlier meeting went a little bit long, so as soon as we have quorum, we'll get started, and thank you for being with us. Okay, I think we have quorum now. Again, my apologies for starting just a little bit late, and welcome to our regular council meeting for Wednesday, April the 27th. Welcome to everybody who's watching online and those who have joined us virtually. Welcome to staff and members of council, of course. So I want to let you know that this meeting is being audio, video recorded, and live streamed on the Town of Innisfil's YouTube channel and shall form part of the record, which will be retained in accordance to the town's retention bylaw. And for more information, please contact the clerk's office. So we'll call this meeting to order and ask if Councillor Fowler would please deliver the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Town of Innisfil acknowledges that the Town of Innisfil is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. We also acknowledge that this land is the traditional territories of the first people of Turtle Island. It is shared between the Anishinaabe people of Beausoleil First Nation, Chippewas of Brahma First Nation, and Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, and we thank them for their generations of stewardship. This meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people, and as settlers, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. The town acknowledges the forced sacrifices that are the foundation of Canadian society today. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll now go to item number 2, which is the open forum. We have 2 participants in the open forum, and I will ask Jean Bizenaire, please, if he would turn on his video and audio and begin. And just to let everyone know, our procedural bylaw allows for 2 minutes. And Mr. Bizenaire, whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is pertaining the amendment of putting in what is considered a group home, existing group home and proposed mental health and wellness service center or service home on Third Line, which is across the street from where we live. And my issue is, I don't see how this is concerning. My issue is I worry that it really is, it sounds like from reading this thing, it's more of an addiction center. And to have people with addiction issues, we all need a place to go to get help. I get that. But to have 25 people living on 2 acres of property with a 5-person staff is to me very irresponsible, because these people need a lot of help. They need a lot of counseling, and they've got written down here, there's 5 people, but what happens to the people that take care of the facility? You've got cooking, you've got chefs, you've got cleaning, you've got maintenance, you've got all sorts of people. There's going to be way more than 5 people in this building helping 25 people who are not there for the day, but 25 people who are there for 30 days and 30 nights. So, like, to me, just reading this, there's so many holes of so many things that need to be addressed. I just don't understand how a facility like this sounds more like an institution. And I worry that this particular address, this particular group home is not geared, and the street's not geared for it. We talked about it at the last Zoom meeting, and there's a lot of issues that issues that are still unresolved. And I know the town wants to do the right thing and deal with mental health issues. We all do. And it's not to say that I don't want to as well, but I just want to make sure, I think we need more time to figure out if this is the right facility for 25 people living there. Because the other thing is, when it comes to addiction, there's all sorts of addictions. There's gambling addiction, there's sex addiction, there's alcohol addiction, there's drug addiction, and it doesn't describe who's like where the focus lies. And if you read some of these centers, they do emphasize the fact that you need to have a focus on a certain type of addiction so that these people aren't all living together with their own needs. And that's just the issue of addiction. Within the addiction group, you also have issues with certain types of people need certain types of help. Aboriginals have certain types of addiction which need a certain type of help. Women have their addiction with their certain help. Kids, adults, seniors. There's so many different levels of help that these people need, that to sort of pile them into one room or one house on this property, it just seems like just something bad will happen. And I'm not wanting that or wishing that or anything like that, but I just think there's way more answers that need to be resolved than what I see here in the report.
Thank you so much.
I don't know. I know a lot of my neighbors have the same concern. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Biesner. And as you know, we'll be discussing that later in the agenda. And next on open forum is Dr. Shell Geller.
Thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, I want to compliment Mayor Dolan. She and I have had numerous email exchanges and one-on-one Zoom sessions. At all times, I felt that she heard me. Even though we don't always agree, I have grown to acquire a great deal of respect for her. I'm going to suggest that Council defer implementing an STA bylaw until additional information can be obtained for the following reasons. One of last week's speakers reported that the Oro-Medonte bylaw is still in effect and that there is a legal challenge to the Ontario Land Tribunal's decision. Innisfil town staff placed a great deal of emphasis on this decision, and it appears that the jury is still out there. Secondly, there are several jurisdictions near us in which the prohibition of STAs has been and continues to be in effect. Third, there is little benefit to bringing in the bylaw now versus waiting several months. Do a comprehensive review of existing STA legislation in other jurisdictions and await the Oro-Medonte bylaw legitimacy decision. Fourth, the proposed bylaw, with the exception of demerit points for possible future STAs, would not become operational until November 1st. The town already has legislation to control noise and other disruptions. Why unnecessarily rush this bylaw? Fifth, there is a strong possibility that if Council passes STA legislation and an STA opens for business, it is for all practical purposes here forever and cannot be shut down. I urge Council to defer this legislation until more information, the Oro-Medonte appeal, a review of other jurisdictions is available, and thus can bring forward a more meaningful piece of legislation that will truly protect the peace and quiet that all of us in the town of Innisfil deserve. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Geller. Next, we have approval of the agenda. And we have two additions to the agenda that will go under as delegations. So could I please ask Deputy Mayor Davidson and Councillor Ices if they would move and second the adoption of the agenda as amended. All those in favor? That is carried. Next, are there any disclosures of interest, pecuniary or conflict on tonight's agenda? Seeing no hands, if one becomes apparent to you during the meeting, please let us know at that time. So next I will go to item 5, presentations and petitions. We do have a presentation tonight, and I'm happy to welcome CEO and President Janice Scott with us here this evening. Welcome, Janice.
Lovely to be here, Your Worship. Thank you. And I'm so pleased that Board Chair Charlotte Wallace was able to be with us this evening. And actually, she'll start things rolling for us. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Charlotte Wallace, and I'm Chair of the Royal Victoria Regional Health Centre Board of Directors. This evening, I'm joined by Janice Scott, RVH President and CEO, and we're very pleased to have the opportunity to come before Council and members of the community who are joining virtually tonight. We last addressed Council in October, and a lot has happened since then. Tonight, we want to provide you with an update and give you a glimpse of what the future of healthcare in South Simcoe County might look like as we work together to bring healthcare closer to home for your constituents as soon as possible. Team RVH has worked closely with the town of Innisfil to this point, and you can be assured that that partnership will continue as we advance our planning for the future South Campus. Of course, we kicked off this very busy 6 months on October 13th, when Mayor Dolan and members of council joined us to announce the location of RVH's future South Campus. Boy, that was a great day. All councillors were in attendance. What a statement about your commitment to RVH's South Campus. Shortly after, we also held a well-attended community listening session with Mayor Dolan and Deputy Mayor Davidson, part of our very comprehensive joint consultation plan. Last month, RVH welcomed Premier Doug Ford and Health Minister Christine Elliott to announce a $2.5 million planning grant for the South Campus. We were delighted to have Mayor Dolan participate in the event, and she took the opportunity to thank the government for accelerating development of RVH's South Campus through a Minister's Zoning Order, or MZO. As you know, the town of Innisfil requested the MZO, which provides certainty that a hospital can be built on the site at Innisfil Beach Road and Yonge Street. This important milestone will allow RVH to proceed with detailed site planning, get shovels in the ground faster, and bring healthcare and jobs to South Simcoe County sooner. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. And now I'll turn it over to Janice Scott, RVH President and CEO. Janice?
Thanks very much, Charlotte, and good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. I thought it might be helpful to maybe just briefly revisit RVH's plans, sort of to ground our conversation tonight. This diagram represents our graduated one system, two site integrated model of care. One step in our plan was the 2019 opening of the outpatient clinics at the Rosado Health and Wellness Center, which I'm sure all of you would agree have been a resounding success. The next 3 steps will happen over the next decade. It includes significant redevelopment and expansion of our current facility, or the North Campus. Of course, at the same time, exciting construction will begin on the South Campus. These steps represent our stage 1 submission, which was submitted to the province on March 31st of this year. In the next stage of the graduated model, we'll add some inpatient beds at the South Campus. And of course, this is all with the eye to developing a full service hospital within 20 years at the South Campus. So as you are all aware, RVH's South Campus will be located on this 83-acre site right at the southwest corner of Yonge Street and Innisfil Beach Road. We acquired this property from the well-respected Ices family, which has deep business and philanthropic roots in Innisfil. This property is ideally located directly across from Innisfil's Civic Campus and, of course, the Rosado Center. This image will not be the final design of the facility, but it does give you a sense of how the South Campus will expand over 20 years. As noted, the first phase, completed in 10 years, will be the health hub, focused on outpatient clinics, day procedures, minor medical procedures, and diagnostic tests. The South Campus in this phase will also include an urgent care center. The health hub will free up capacity and reduce wait times at the North Campus Emergency Department. Then in 15 years, we'll add the inpatient beds that aren't dependent on an emergency department, such as seniors care or rehabilitation. It's very important to note the North and South Campus are completely interdependent. One really can't proceed without the other. Services within the 2-campus plan are integrated, they're not duplicated. For example, while Innisfil residents will continue to receive advanced cardiac care at the North Campus, their diagnostics and follow-up care could occur at the South Campus. Integrated, not duplicated. Within 20 years, the South Campus will evolve to be a full-service acute care hospital with a 24/7 emergency department, birthing units, and operating rooms as well. All very exciting. So as we embark on a more detailed site planning for the South Campus, we want you to know that we're guided by 5 principles to help drive the overall design of the South Campus, including community connection, environment integration, strategic growth, financial sustainability, and health and wellness, all key considerations in decision-making. Our principles are aligned with the town of Innisfil's planning goals to create an integrated civic hub on both sides of Yonge Street. And we're also working closely with the County of Simcoe on road planning to ensure visible, easy access to the South Campus from Yonge Street and Innisfil Beach Road, especially in emergency situations. The main design consideration is the site itself. There's a 2-story or 36-foot difference in elevation between Yonge Street and Innisfil Beach Road. So you can tell from the bottom right-hand photo, which looks back toward Yonge Street, just how significant the grade change is. Like, you can see the lights of the sport field just peeking above the road. So we're planning to follow the natural grade of the property and take advantage of the significant change in elevation. We're not going to work against it. This could mean that you might enter at a ground level main entrance from fronting Yonge Street, but it would actually be level 2 of the building. It's very similar actually to today in our North Campus. The back of the facility facing west towards the woodlot will be like a walkout basement from level 1, just to give you a sense of the property. That woodlot is actually the jewel in the crown of the property, and the views onto the forest will promote our key design principles of healing and wellness. In fact, not only the woodlot, but it'll also have a 30-meter buffer around it, and it will be designated an environmental protection area. And we're so fortunate, as you know, to have Lake Simcoe as an incredible natural resource. So we know its importance can't be overstated as a source of water, food, and recreation. So we have consulted with environmental and Indigenous groups, and we'll also continue to work closely with the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority to ensure the South Campus Plan is aligned with the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. We will enhance the environment with stormwater management ponds, natural plantings, and walking paths. A wellness loop will wind along the woodlot and continue through the property. Lovers Creek, a natural spring currently underground, can be elevated and enhanced with a pedestrian walkway. Trails will provide an opportunity for area residents to walk, bike, run, snowshoe, but hopefully not in April, throughout the beautiful property. We can enhance the natural environment with an Indigenous healing garden for sacred herbs such as sage, a butterfly and bee pollinator garden, perhaps a community garden, and a playground. Our goal is to create a landscape that connects patients, families, and caregivers to the natural environment and also to the community. Residents told us that community connection and proximity to the Civic Campus are priorities for them. We could consider a pedestrian underpass that travels below Yonge Street and connects directly to the town's wellness trail. The driveways will be aligned to ensure direct access from the Civic Campus to the South Campus while minimizing traffic congestion and maximizing safety at what will become a very, very busy intersection. These connective elements will all contribute to a sense that the campuses are part of the same community, the anchor that Innisfil described in its 2015 placemaking document. A large public plaza at the main entrance would serve as a visible landmark and provide a warm welcome to patients and visitors. The plaza will be extensively planted, perfect for people to gather, meet, and wait for appointments. It could also serve as a community gathering spot for small events or live music performances. Our goal is to create landscaping that connects patients, family members, and caregivers, visitors, and staff to the natural environment, and of course, also to the community. Easy access and navigation was another high priority for residents we spoke with. There'll be a main driveway into the campus directly from Yonge Street via a flat tree-lined roadway, a natural continuation from the Civic Campus main entrance. The ambulance and emergency department drop-off will be from Innisfil Beach Road, providing quick access from Highway 400. Internal roadways will clearly be identified to provide easy navigation of the site. What would be a presentation without talking about parking? It's always a priority. We will provide close, ample parking, but minimize the visibility of surface parking by using the natural slope of the property to create 2 levels of underground parking. The underground parking would offer protection from the elements, minimize surface parking, and protect the natural elements of the property. Subject to technical and financial verification, the roof of the parking lot could be planted to further enhance the natural landscape. Light wells would bring in natural light to enhance safety. A smaller amount of above ground parking would be created with trees to provide shade and extend that healing environment. The 83-acre site allows us a lot of flexibility, and not just for our 20-year plan, but well beyond that. And we have big plans. On the south side of the property, we can co-locate partner buildings with below ground parking that takes advantage of the split elevation. Green roofs above the parking structure would create quads or commons, like you see in some universities, that would offer accessible, attractive outdoor space for quiet reflection or healthy breaks. There'll be so many opportunities to make this a health, education, and an innovation hub. There's room for physicians' offices, clinics, and a future university campus, allowing RVH to expand its teaching mandate. Are you excited yet? Because I sure am. We're working simultaneously on our plans for the North Campus as well, because we have to maximize the existing building, including fitting out the empty shelled spaces that were built as part of the 2012 expansion. This will allow us to expand specialized clinical services, such as critical care. In fact, we've already submitted to government a plan to add a second 15-bed critical care unit. We also added 2 additional radiation suites to our cancer center. Many clinics will expand, such as dialysis clinic. There will also be significant expansions to mental health, maternal child, and the neonatal intensive care, which is currently significantly undersized. We will continue to expand and add advanced technology in our imaging department, including, of course, the new PET-CT scanner that was announced last Friday, another great news day. Rotary Place, the adjacent building, which includes a lodge for cancer patients, will expand too. We're going to free up space in the main hospital for patient care. In the expansion phase, a new 9-story inpatient building will house additional beds. The building will also have a new surgical area that will allow us to add 5 new operating rooms. RVH's busy emergency department will grow with 15 additional treatment spaces. In 20 years, RVH will have more than 900 beds between the 2 sites. This hospital system will see more than 1 million patient visits each year. The cost of RVH's one system, 2-site capital project, including the North Campus expansion and the new South Campus Health Hub at the 10-year mark, is estimated to be roughly $2.5 billion. In addition to the obvious healthcare benefits, the RVH system will also be a huge economic driver for the region. At maturity, with the South Campus built and the North Campus expanded, RVH will more than double its workforce with 5,000 additional employees. And those are stable, well-paying jobs. While RVH's expansion project is progressing quickly, and Charlotte and I were really excited to share that with you, it is also important that I pause just to manage expectations. The timelines to build and open a hospital, they're long, arduous at times, and complex. And again, the 10-year clock to get the South Campus Health Hub built doesn't start ticking until we've secured all of our approvals. Now, to date, we have submitted the pre-capital submission to the province. Our plan has been endorsed by Ontario Health Central Region, and we've just submitted stage 1 to the government. Again, our goal, guided on ongoing community consultation, is to complete this ambitious expansion of the current North Campus and open phase 1 of the South Campus, the Health Hub, in 10 years. And while we work with the provincial government to advance our plan, we are continuing our broad and genuine community consultation. In the past 6 months, we've continued to engage area residents through presentations, the Town of Innisfil and RVH websites, surveys, and partner newsletters. We have now logged an unprecedented 83,700 engagement interactions. I mean, that is an unprecedented level of consultation. RVH has continued to consult with our Indigenous partners, co-designing many elements of our plan. It's important to note that we will be undertaking an archaeological assessment of the South Campus site this fall, and Indigenous partners, including Williams Treaties First Nations and the Huron-Wendat, will be invited to participate in that work. Meanwhile, our Indigenous partners and the Barrie Area Native Advisory Circle are invaluable guides and have supported RVH to introduce a hospital-wide smudging policy, cultural safety training for staff and physicians, self-identification protocols, and a dedicated Indigenous health team. We're going to continue to work with our Indigenous partners, not just as we expand in the future, but really in what we can do today to improve spaces, practices, and services. RVH is a key part of Innisfil's future. We'd like to think so. Likewise, Innisfil is a vital element of RVH's plan. And we will continue to work very closely with the town's planning team to ensure our goals are aligned. And together, we'll build an integrated civic hub on both sides of Yonge Street. And we'll coordinate future public transit and work together to create a large recreational network across the two sites. But the timing is perfect as the town continues its master planning to 2051. It provides us with a unique opportunity to have a shared vision and common goals for the future of Innisfil. In closing, as we jointly plan and embrace our exciting future, we also pause to celebrate the past. RVH has had a proud history of caring for people throughout Innisfil, Barrie, and South Simcoe County. In fact, this year we celebrate 125 years since the first Royal Vic opened in downtown Barrie. So I want to thank Mayor Dolan and CAO Oliver Jirchow for presenting Doug Frost, Vice Chair of RVH Board of Directors, and me with this anniversary plaque to celebrate our important milestone. Since its inception in 1897, RVH has been dedicated to providing outstanding healthcare to our community. A tradition will continue for another 125 years with the addition of the South Campus in Innisfil. Thank you for your time this evening. Chair Charlotte Wallace and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chair Wallace, and thank you very much, Janice, for being here. And I'll go to Council for questions or comments from members of Council. Councillor Orsatti.
Just to say, comment to say thank you for your wonderful presentation. It's exciting and it really gives all residents of Innisfil something to be excited for and hope for better health care for them closer to home. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have, go ahead, Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. And thank you, Ms. Scott, for that presentation. And I love the fact that you are using the slope of that land in your design. For the next few years that we get to farm it, I know we're going to look at that slope differently when we're planting our crops there and envisioning what it's going to look like. And it's very exciting.
Thank you. It is exciting.
Yes, and if you need to know anything about that land, I think Councillor Ices could help you out there.
Give me a call. There's a few rocks I'll point out to you and stuff like that. So
Thank you.
Thanks. I was going to say that the very first meeting I was to attend at RVH North Campus was a meeting with a group that was trying to find a location for the other campus. And as I was trying to get to the meeting, the 400 closed. And I think I was about 30 minutes late getting there. And I remember thinking, boy, if there's anything that illustrates the need for a South Campus in Innisfil more than this, I was just late for a meeting. I wasn't in an ambulance having a heart attack. So really very excited about this future for Innisfil, and congratulations on 125 years. And also, I don't know if you're counting the number of sleeps yet, Janice, but very, very happy for you. Congratulations on a well-deserved retirement. And I hope you enjoy it greatly. And we look forward to working with CEO Hunt and Chair Wallace and the board to bring this vision to reality.
Thank you very much, Mayor Dolan. I'll watch with excitement, I can assure you of that.
Thank you. So now could I please ask Councillor Ices and Councillor Orsatti to move and second the recommendation to receive the presentation for this evening. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Have a good evening. All right, that brings us to delegations, and we do have 2 delegations this evening. And the first one is from Peter Meneguzzi regarding the application on the third line. Mr. Meneguzzi, if you want to turn on your video and audio. Our procedure, we do have a packed agenda tonight, and our procedural bylaw allows for 10 minutes for delegations, and so I'd please ask you to respect that for this evening. It would be much appreciated. And whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you. And again, thank you very much, Your Worship and Council, and all other members and interested parties for allowing me to speak this evening. First off, I'd like to just take a moment and mention I am very empathetic, and I think my whole family is empathetic to the members of society that struggle with mental health and addiction issues. And we understand that there is a need, a greater need, to find ways of supporting and managing those issues. I wanted to walk through my understanding of the zoning application and the amendment, I guess, that's being proposed for 4136, the third line. From my perspective, the application lacked transparency of the real goal. The intention of the owner has always been to pursue exclusive luxury rehabilitation facility. The use of a group home expansion of 400% of an increase is being put forward as a Trojan horse to hide the fact that they want to operate a for-profit mental health and wellness service luxury rehabilitation center. Comparable facilities noted in the response matrix, as well as marketed on the same luxuryrehab.com website, were included as comparables in response as a precedent. The farm in Stouffville, located on 40 acres, has the capacity or occupancy of 10 beds. Another road facility has 47 acres and 8 persons as an occupancy, as described on all of their web pages. Kirby, the Vaughan facility, is on a 110-acre facility or parcel of land. The Erin facility, which seemed to have been the biggest highlight as a precedent component, is set on 13 acres and with a capacity of 29 clients, with residential and outpatient services. So the current application is suggesting there is no outpatient, only residential services within the Simcoe mental health facility. So that's what we're actually talking about. So 4136, the third line, is currently being marketed and branded as Simcoe Addiction Mental Health for a 25-person facility on 2.8 acres. If I use the Erin facility as a precedent in terms of, I guess, property size as well as occupant load, 2.2 persons per acre, which would probably put the Simcoe Addiction Mental Health facility right back at the existing 5.5 to 6 person group home capacity. This seems to be completely out of context for what the purpose is and the location. Not to mention, the average cost of care is $20,000 to $25,000. I'm not quite sure how that supports the majority of our community. I'm a bit surprised with the direction of the staff report. Interesting how they have been able to satisfy themselves with the town's policies and the provinces related to the use as a quasi-agricultural use. The intent of the zoning is to establish allowable uses for the property not designed around the operator. Zoning is for use, not the user. It would seem as though the staff have been heavily influenced by many of the promises put forward at the site visit. Unfortunately, the discussion on how the operation will be run are largely non-enforceable measures. What protection or control exists if and when zoning comes into effect? The requested expansion, as I remind you, is 400% of an increase from its original intended use. Solely being targeted for the rehab future. In no way has this been test checked for a traditional group home operation required with access to the community under its traditional form. No, this is a new operator with no track record. No other facilities have been run by this particular operator. I'm not quite sure how we are comfortable with business viability under the described operating model. I'm not sure how this functions or works. If the business fails, how does the zoning protect the community from a new operator with a different operating model? The other component, which is quite interesting, is they've decided to adopt small other components within the changes. They've included a maximum of, or rather, minimum rather, of 5 parking stalls. This is less restrictive than the current bylaw. This would suggest that they could park 15 cars on the site. So I'm suggesting that there should be a look at the minimum and maximum for added control. Changes and modifications to the property are also required, which were also suggested is not being required or needed. The addition of a delivery space, anticipated deliveries only once a week. That's what was suggested. That's interesting. How are they disposing of medical or biomedical waste with no commercial pickup, only municipal services being provided? The requirement of a new fire route, doubling the width of the driveway over 341 feet of length, from 10 to approximately 20 feet, inclusive of a hammerhead for turnaround beyond the property. We have a road widening, or rather an entrance widening with a new culvert that's going to be required. This might also require tree removal, all of which is stated as not required, and no exterior landscaping modifications would be needed in the application. The hydrogeological report is inaccurate based on the previous site plan conditions. The water balance study needs to be revised. The increased hard surface will reduce the on-site filtration or infiltration. This could pose an issue for the agricultural property to the south of the subject lands. The overland flow could increase by approximately 64,000 liters, not to mention the storm water and the effect on the lands to the south. Fitting into the fabric of the community is questionable. With the need for 64 cameras, many pointed into the public domain and the adjoining property. This infringes on the enjoyment and use of the surrounding area without being under the watchful eye. Not to mention the previously noted property modifications due to the significance of the changes being requested by virtue of the road widening, or actually the access, I'll go from there. I'll leave it at the road widening, plus the culvert, sorry. Staff have acknowledged the subject lands are currently being used and operated under the current zoning. No substantial effort has been made by the owner or operator to rectify the perimeter fencing, restricting the vulnerable population from easily accessing adjoining public and private lands is concerning. This is one particular example of inaction or inability to act from the town's perspective to restrict or control the current and proposed use. This is concerning. Our final thoughts, or my final thoughts rather, would be to request a temporary use zoning bylaw. Interim use to allow the operator to satisfy conditions including language that establishes the non-enforceable measures to be enforceable through the zoning and demonstrate viability. That's paramount, so that it allows the operator to demonstrate their ability to operate and function. This puts the control back in the hands of the town. The addition of the controls within the zoning to require any owner or operator to fall under the same operating requirement model going forward. Because it's not to suggest that this operator would be here forever, but the property will be, and the zoning that is being put forth will be forever. So the proper controls need to be put in place. I strongly encourage council to either deny the application or, at a minimum, to defer, to make amendments to the proposed application with a full understanding of the future and the measures that may or may not be in place to make sure that it works well for the community at large. And that includes the address.
Thank you, Mr. Meneguzzi, very much for that. Any questions or comments from members of council to Mr. Meneguzzi? Seeing none, thank you for that. And we will be dealing with that later in the meeting. If you want to stay online and just turn off your camera, that's good with us. And me, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate having the opportunity, and I hope it was clear enough. Thank you. Have a great night.
You too. Okay, so we have another delegation, and that is Mr. Kirschenblatt, I believe, is the next delegate. And if you could turn on your camera. Oh, there you are. I see you now. Hello. Good. And welcome. And so I'll start my timer, and yes, 10 minutes, please.
Excuse me, Your Worship.
Yes.
We need to receive the previous delegation.
Of course we do. My fault. Sorry. So I'd ask Councillor Van Berkel and Councillor Waters to move and second the receipt of the first delegation by Mr. Meneguzzi. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And so I'll reset my time, Mr. Kirschenblatt. So whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you again on this matter. I was informed of this meeting and the staff report only yesterday. I did have a good conversation with Tim Kane this afternoon. He apologized for the late notice going out to the community about this evening's discussion and the staff report being available. Things have been quiet about the orbit for the past 6 months from a community point of view, and any updates from you and your team. So I'm not aware of any outreach to the residents over this time. After reading the staff report, I sense the project has slowed down. I see no GO station construction happening this year as was promised. I'm not surprised. I am, however, pleased that the process of implementing the Orbit vision has come down to reality. The project is huge and impactful and needs extensive thought and due diligence. I see a new project team is in place. What I don't see is the mandate given to the team. In talking to Tim Kane today, it sounds like the mandate really remains the same, just with different people in place. We'll see how that turns out. I would like to point out recommendation number 2 that states the town design concept continues to be collectively discussed. The design concept continues to be collectively discussed with the town. I would like an explanation of who the participants of that discussion is with. I see no involvement again with town residents. I've offered Mr. Kane my 40 years of experience in major development projects to participate in a residents working group. I have not been asked. Now, Mr. Kane tells me this is coming in the next little while. Again, I'll wait and see. I'm not surprised to read that the developers are proposing to change the Orbit vision and its center of mass concept. The original concept was never real, as some of you have indicated to me. The report speaks to a town peer review team. What is the makeup of this team? What are their credentials? What is their mandate? Do they have the best interests of the town residents as priority number one? Lots of questions and lots of backroom discussion. Page 2 speaks to adopting a master site plan prior to the Orbit Potential and Innovation Plan, the OPIP, which is to become a new secondary plan governing the entire Orbit MZO lands. This sounds like putting the cart before the horse. I suggest the OPIP is needed to inform the master plan. Both need to be part of a public process. The report continues to refer to all parties will continue to meet. These meetings continue, again, without community representation. Clearly, something is happening that has created a shift away from the original center of mass planning. Reality says to move quickly on the Promise Go station, which again, I support, and I think you've all supported and want to see happen. A new master plan is clearly needed to allow for a standalone station. The station will need surface parking to meet Metrolinx's business case. The current community will demand it. And there are many design challenges to create a station that should have a civic presence, that will allow a new village center to grow around it. We need to see new design options. We all want to be proud of this new community. I would like to see the OPIP speak to me as a resident of this great town. This document does not even attempt to align or integrate with our current official plan. It is full of planning jargon that can be used to create a new city anywhere in the world. I want to remind you that Innisfil is a collection of small villages and rural communities. The Orbit is not Innisfil. It is an attempt to allow high density growth in Alcona. Are you proposing that one day the Orbit will be renamed the City of Alcona? At this point, Innisfil as we know it will no longer exist. We should accept growth challenges compatible with our place in the world. We have no responsibility to accommodate 150,000 people in our rural town and county. We can provide new housing in a more compact form in a community that is low-rise, walkable, livable, provides families a place to live that is not being provided in high-density communities throughout the GTA. I'm sure all of you have traveled the 407 corridor from Markham to Vaughan to Mississauga and see the extensive high-rise development that is happening along that corridor, plus all the development that is happening within the city of Toronto. This form of housing is not needed, okay? It's not necessary to accommodate the growth of Ontario or the GTA. Are you all sorry. Does any one of you believe that a city of 150,000 people can function without a 400 series highway at its doorsteps? Are you all expecting the province to build an access highway from the 400? Is this really better than allowing Barrie to just annex Innisfil? Either way, it will not be the town that we all want it to be. I would urge council to open the discussion of what the mandate of this new secondary plan should be. The internal dealings and discussions that are going on are painful. I, for one, would like to understand the real issues before I support such a massive plan. The current appeal of the MZO might change all of this discussion anyway. I look forward to a reset of this process. The challenge is to let our location, natural heritage, Lake Simcoe, transportation network, tell us the growth potential of a new community in line with our official plan. We have every right to push back against a growth plan mandated by the province or county if the growth does not fit. This is not a vision for continual urban sprawl. It is an acceptance of giving up an amount of agricultural land to the best need for the larger community, not just dropping a city in our midst. As noted in the OPIP document, I would like to get an answer from council that it, quote, resoundingly and unanimously is allowing the design process to continue to accommodate a city of 150,000 people within the original Orbit boundaries. All of your constituents should know this. I am hoping your minds have changed over the past 6 months and you're all in line with a reset. So thank you for the time. You can ask me questions, and I look forward to a real community involvement in what could really be a very special place on the Orbit lands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirschenblatt. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Kirschenblatt? Seeing none, thank you for your delegation. And as you know, we're going to be discussing this evening. It's on the agenda, and you're welcome to stay with us with your camera and mic off. Or you can watch us on YouTube, whatever's most comfortable for you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'll be watching.
Thank you. I don't know how I managed to mute myself. Next on the agenda is item 7, and that is the county council meeting. Oh, I forgot again to do these. I think I need more sleep. All right, I would ask for Councillor Fowler and Councillor Payne to move and second the delegation that's on this evening's council. All in favor? That is carried. Now we'll move on to item 7, County Council Municipal Associations. Anything that you sit on for the good of the community and you have an update for? No updates this evening? Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Sorry, a message out about everything. This lot of conversation as well, and Zoom that we've last 40 minutes.
Deputy Mayor, I'm sorry, you're breaking up, and we're having trouble. You're having tech issues, and we're trying to get IT to help with those. And I think we've lost the deputy. Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, the Deputy Mayor is having issues with Zoom. I have sent a request to IT support to assist him. We're not sure what's going on, but hopefully they'll be able to sort that out shortly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you keep your camera off, sometimes that helps, Deputy Mayor. If you had any, did you have any comments or questions on this item, on item 7?
As you know, at the county, we dealt with the library today, and you spoke very much in favor of protecting our library in our favor. So we'll have for ourselves in the future with cost. The administrators are going to have trouble with cost in the future to come. It was not the perfect day, but it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other updates from anyone else? Seeing none, I will just comment that yes, it was a difficult day at the county yesterday, but ending on a good note, that we did have a demonstration from IT on a new broadband mapping system that they're putting there. So you can go to anywhere in the county and click on a property. It'll tell you what kind of connectivity it has and what they're planning to do if there's any improvements on that piece of property. Also attended Enterprises, InPower, and Police Services Board in the last little while, and it is audited financial statement time. So we had audits from all of those corporations, and I'm happy to say that they were all clean audits. Seeing no one else, then we'll move to the consent list. So we'll go through here. For those who are not familiar with this, we'll go through all of the items listed on the agenda. People, members of council can ask questions, or they can pull an item to debate it and further in committee of the whole. If it is not pulled, that means at the end of the meeting, staff or council will confirm with the recommendation that's printed in the agenda. So item number 1, A1 is special council meeting minutes from April the 6th. A2, special council meeting minutes dated April the 13th. A3, council meeting minutes dated April the 13th. And then B1, that would be the Innisfil Heritage Advisory Committee meeting. B2, the Innisfil Beach Park Ad Hoc Committee meeting. I just want to give a shout out to Vice Chair Rancom for his vision of Dog Days of Summer. We're looking at a pilot project for that this summer, something a little unique for Innisfil residents, and it was his brainchild. Next is B3, is the Pitch-In Committee meeting. Nothing? All right, and I've done it again, Council. I've missed the EOC update that was supposed to have gone with the former item, so I'm going to move back to that and apologize to staff. Ms. Ray, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Council, the Simcoe County Muskoka District Health Unit continues to recommend a full approach of COVID-19 safety measures, such as masking indoors. It appears that SMDHU is not planning to enact Section 22 orders for additional COVID-19 measures at this time. Dr. Gardner indicated that there may be a need to enter sector-specific guidance if there is any indication of increased transmission. There may also be an extended mask requirement in these settings. Town staff have been reviewing COVID-19 procedures and protocols, and during tonight's meeting, Council will have the opportunity to review staff's recommendations for COVID-related bylaws. While face covering requirements for staff ended on April 4th, masking is still encouraged for all those who are comfortable. The province has announced that masking requirements in high-risk settings that were to expire today have been extended to June 11th, 2022, including in public transit, healthcare, long-term care, retirement homes and shelters, and other congregate care settings. With this announcement, masking is still required for passengers riding in Innisfil Transit and for those attending the Rosardo Health and Wellness Center. Finally, the GoVax bus is returning to the Innisfil Recreational Complex North parking lot on May 22nd. Walk-ins are accepted for COVID-19 vaccination doses 1, 2, 3, or boosters for eligible individuals.
Thank you, Ms. Ray, and sorry for skipping over you. The GoVax buses have been really, really busy, so I'm glad to see them coming back. So next is item B4. No, I did that one already. No, I didn't. The Innisfil Accessibility Advisory Committee. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to do a little shout out to our committee. Most of them, or I would say all of them, have issues and accessibility issues. But we all got together and went down to the park and walked through the park and checked out different things that needed a little repairing or improvements to make it more accessible for everyone. So I just wanted to do a shout out to the committee for doing that, and they did a great job. I really appreciate all the work that they did and the help that they did for getting all the information for staff. So thank you, committee members.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. You've been a great champion for that committee since the start of the term, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Next is item C1, which was the orbit process update. Deputy Mayor Davidson.
You can pull that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Oh, and you sound better now. You're not breaking up anymore. Very good. All right, item C2, the COVID-19 bylaws. I just wanted to ask, well, I'm not ask a question, but just comment that about the patios and extending them to end of November. And my question would be if we go through more waves, can we look at extending them through 2023? And I don't know who wants to take that. Mr. Vickers.
Your Worship, yeah, we'll look at that as, I mean, COVID's continued to evolve and staff will continue to respond. So if we get there and that's appropriate, then I'm sure staff will accommodate council's wishes in that regard, absolutely, to serve the community as best suits. We're hoping we don't get to that point, but we've been all over the map. So we'll continue to demonstrate that kind of flexibility on your behalf.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vickers. And just to point out, if anybody who's seen this report, the amount of work that goes behind pivoting for the COVID-19 has just been incredible. Everything from deciphering the regulations that the province brings down and then changes repeatedly. And as I know Ms. Verbosch would tell you, usually they Friday afternoon is when they release them, and she has to spend the whole weekend deciphering them. But everybody, bylaw and Parks Committee, and everybody who's done all of the extra work required to keep our community safe, thank you so much for that. C3, the Innisfil Transit update. Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Worship. I don't need to pull this. I just thought it was just great to see so many professional validations of the service that we provide within Innisfil Uber. It's great to see between council and the staff and the vision they've had. So just good to see that everybody else noticing what we've done.
It is great to have that validation. And the other thing I loved about it too was how we were able to help during COVID with the Essential Trips Assistance Program. 16,000 trips we're taking through this program in 2021. And as of mid-March 2022, over 25,000 trips have been supported. And that's taking people for free to medical appointments, to get prescriptions, to get groceries, to go to the food bank. So just a fabulous service for our community. C4. That is the Mediation of Neighborhood Disputes Pilot Program. Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't want to pull it. I just want to make a comment on it. As you and I in the past have been involved in situations where neighbors almost physically use bylaw to beat each other, this is a welcome idea. I like the idea of directing it to people that are good in negotiations, like that's their sole purpose, is to mediate in this regard. It frees up our bylaw officers for far more important tasks than squabbles that may occur between two properties that share the same line, so to speak. I really want to see where this goes after a year. I'm going to be paying attention to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters.
Sorry about that. I lost my button. I don't want to pull it. Just a quick question, if I may. Is after the proponents go through this process, does the committee, does the organization dictate a resolution, or is what ends up happening at that point?
Mr. Parkin.
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Waters. So the mediation process ideally ends in the two parties coming to some sort of agreement on how to resolve their dispute or to move forward. And then they may share that information with the town. They may not. The mediation process is confidential. So they would only share it with us if they were willing to do so. But the organization, York Region Housing Mediation Services, would certainly provide us with, data and statistics on sort of the success of the program and how it's helping our residents.
I guess my question is, what happens if the two groups cannot come together? Does the person who's mediating it impose a resolution?
No, so mediation is different than arbitration, where arbitration is where there's a decision maker who would impose a decision at the end of the process. A mediation is meant to be to come to a resolution that both parties can agree to, and that's the process. So it's not always successful, unfortunately, but through that process, hopefully they're able to. That's what these mediators are trained to do, is to find ways to resolve disputes and find a common ground between two people who are in dispute. So typically, if they're willing to participate in the process from the start, they might be willing to compromise in some way. So,
thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say I'm as excited as Councillor Fowler for this. The worst part of my job for the last 28 years has been neighbor disputes, because you just can't win. You have both neighbors disliking you at the end of it, and each one thinks you're favoring the other neighbor. So it is a huge, I don't think most people realize how much time, and not just bylaw, right? So once bylaw gets called, and then it escalates to police, and the police are having to respond quite often as well. And it's just a huge, huge waste of resources. And when I first suggested this to staff, it was a pipe dream. It was wishful thinking. I didn't know that there were communities that had this service. So I just want to thank staff for following up on my ranting and actually looking into it and finding this service. And I'm really excited to see, and I hope it does help not only neighbors learn to get along with each other, but also free up resources to deal with things that are so much more important. Okay, so the next is C5, transfer of land ownership to in services. C6, that would be the CPPS for Maple Road. C7, the CPPS for Moose-and-Lanka Road. C8, the zoning bylaw amendment application for the third line. Councillor Nicol.
I wonder if we could refer that for further discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Nicol. Next is C9, the El Sami school site zoning bylaw amendment. C10, the flooding strategy and stormwater management master plan update. Next is D1, building permit issued in Q1 of 2022. And then bylaws, the first bylaw is the estimates, the current year 2022, to establish rates of taxation. E2 would be to regulate short-term accommodation within the boundaries of the town. That would be the first of the recommendations. Councillor Fowler?
I'd like to pull this for discussion, but I don't know, as my position is not the most favorable, if I should be doing such, or would it be wiser for someone else to take it over?
I don't understand.
When we pull something, if I'm not going to be, if we make an amendment and go to vote for it to put it through, something
you can make an amendment. That's definitely why you pull it, is to make an amendment.
Okay.
So Councillor Fowler, so I'm assuming all three?
Yes, ma'am.
Or four?
Or yes, your worship, sorry.
So that would be E2, E3, E4, and E5. Okay, and then F, there's no correspondence for action. G, we have two proclamations. One is, both of them for mental health, the Canadian Mental Health Association's Mental Health Week from May 2 to 8. And we're also done a proclamation for World Maternal Mental Health Day on May the 4th. And that's it. So we'll go back to the first item, and first we have to resolve into committee, or committee of the whole. There we go. Our consent list recommendation. And can I have that moved by Councillor Nicoll and seconded by Deputy Mayor Davidson, that we move items C1, C8, and all of the bylaws into committee of the whole? All those in favor? That is carried. And now resolved to committee of the whole would be moved by Councillor Eisses and seconded by Councillor Van Berkel. All those in favor? That is carried. So we'll go to our first item for discussion, and that was C1. That would be Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Your Worship, I'm still working with the town. They're in my computer trying to figure this out. So you just disappear on me every few minutes. So we're getting.
Sorry, one sec. I'm just trying to figure out who's posting here.
Okay, I've got them on my phone. You can hear them.
Yeah.
So, I just pulled it. I think we have. It's certainly a mess. I've pulled it because of the concerns. I think staff have something to say regarding the orbit, and I'd like Tim Kane to maybe give a better explanation of where we are with this to the general public, if he could, please. And I don't know when I'm going to black out here, so.
Okay. The joys of technology. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I'll ask Mr. Kane if he had some comments to make.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Davidson. Yes, as mentioned earlier in the delegation, it has been a while since we've updated council, and certainly just because it's been quiet doesn't necessarily mean that Orbit itself has been quiet. So there are two main processes that have been going on. The first one is the station design process, and yes, we were aiming for a 2022 start date for construction of that, but I think as pointed out earlier this evening, it is a complex process. So, as much as we were trying to do that, we do need to work with, with the operators of that proposed station and with the people building it, and ensure that we are getting it right the first time. So that is being pushed at this point in time. Obviously, we'll do what we can to provide this necessary community infrastructure as quickly as possible, but at the same time, making sure we put our best foot forward. And, seeing as this is serving Orbit for decades to come, we want to make sure we get that right. The second process that deserves an update is that of the secondary plan process, or we refer to it as OPIP. And the Orbit Potential Innovation Plan, which is where the acronym comes from, is a combination of the municipal class EA process, which looks at the engineering and physical needs of an area, as well as the planning policies to help implement that vision. That process is, and I'm proud to say, has started. We did go through an extensive procurement process and did select a team that we felt best met the Orbit principles and objectives as outlined and as established by Council Sooner. So we're quite excited about that. And that team is working in the early stages of that. It has come up with an engagement strategy, and I know that this community wants input and deserves input on that process. And listening to the earlier comment this evening about, the community wanting the opportunity to shape this process. And I think I've used this analogy before with Orbit, but, that picture and that vision that council endorsed and put us on this path, think of that as a cake. And, what the OPIP secondary plan process is, putting together those ingredients and the recipe for that. So, the cake is what we'd like to get to, that pretty recipe picture that we all strive for. And, quite often, including myself, none of us get to, but at the same time, knowing that, there is a process, and that process is outlined or highlighted in the report tonight, that continuum of engagement with the community that's going to start next month, whereby, we look very carefully and listen very carefully to all members of the community and our Indigenous communities to find out what those ingredients are, and then have that expert consulting team, that we are quite comfortable with and certainly has confidence and experience with these types of transit-oriented communities, put that recipe together and start to implement that vision in those future planning decisions. So it's quite exciting in that regard that that second process is going on. So those are the two main pieces. Obviously, there are more mechanical, more technical updates contained in that report with respect to exploring things like the district energy opportunity or distributed energy resources, things like dovetailing Orbit into the county municipal comprehensive review process and making sure that that growth exercise at the county level is is speaking to the local one and vice versa, and what are the best tools to help those two processes talk to each other. And it's quite exciting, I think, at this point in time to see this project continuing forward. And the other thing, just to close on, there is talk about this being a community of 150,000. We're not talking about next week or next year or next decade. This is a very long-term vision, a longer-term vision than what we typically be looking at for our planning processes. So, it's us being proactive and readying ourselves for, growth that's inevitably coming to this part of the province, whether it's Innisfil or all around us. But, this isn't all happening tomorrow. This is us putting these initial and critical first steps in place today through that station design process and through that secondary plan process. So I'm happy to answer any further questions from council and help with any discussion that may occur.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Any questions or comments? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just wondering if Mr. Kane could please comment on the point 3 of the 6-line bridge elevation. It says issue the developer's revised concept to shift their proposed station. If you could maybe give our residents an idea of what's happening there.
Mr. Kane.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Waters, yes, definitely. So the original Center MMS concept had that integrated design for the plaza and the 6th line and the railway station all happening in that one location. So, as we're looking at more detailed design, the critical elements of the 6th line having to be at the same level as the plaza, may not be a constraint that we have to work with anymore. So as part of this ongoing design discussion and looking at, better ways to deliver on that overhead vision, we were looking at, could we change the elevation of the 6th line to, either remain above grade or go below grade from an asset protection and functionality point of view. So that update is in there just to give direction and certainty to both council and the general public to, the 6th line will continue to be at that elevated grade as it passes over the railway line, and that will be informing that station design and those first phases of design processes as they move forward.
Follow up, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
Mr. Kane, what is the purpose of having an elevated, because that's going to have to all be redone, very, very expensive process. And considering what we were going to do, that was the reason for putting the center of mass underneath the bridge. And so why would the developer now decide to keep the elevation where it is and not just put it at grade level, which Newmarket has, Aurora has, Maple has? What's the purpose of having a raised elevation, which is going to cost them a lot of money? And it seems cost seems to be coming clearer in terms of their concern of this whole process. So are there any guarantees that will stay elevated and not be at grade where, it again ruins the whole idea of what we originally envisioned?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Waters, historically the 6th line has passed over that railway line, as we all know. There are advantages to maintaining that grade separation. A big part of Orbit in that long-term time frame that I was mentioning was future-proofing that concept for the longer term. So maintaining that grade separation helps do that. We've seen many cities in the world that have had at-grade crossings that have had to go back decades later and spend tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars to separate them again. So we have that existing separation there now. It makes sense. Our EA process has confirmed that elevation does have advantages and that bridge should be maintained. And certainly it does help support the electrification and the upgrades of that line as well by redoing that bridge to that necessary elevation at the same time to meet Metrolinx's requirements.
I guess my question is that bridge, the way it stands now, will it stay that way, or are they going to have to rebuild the whole thing? And if that case, that's extra cost. So my concern is that it's because they're also putting at some point in time, are they putting a second line through there where they'd have to widen that whole thing? So if that's the case, the existing bridge may not stay. They may just, because of the cost, put it at grade level.
Mr. Kane.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Waters, the existing bridge won't stay there. The idea is that existing bridge will be enhanced and rebuilt to still cross over the 6th line, but be enhanced to meet the needs of the orbit in terms of its span and to meet the needs of the electrification and clearance from underneath. So, that already is, that project to some degree, save and accept some of the recent changes that Metrolinx may need for that track upgrade, that second line that you mentioned, as well as electrification. Much of that bridge has already been identified in our capital project plan for replacement, and therefore we would be replacing that bridge anyway, and this gives us the opportunity to replace that bridge in a way that better integrates with the orbit.
One last question, Your Honor. I was originally under the impression that the bridge replacement would be part of the developer's cost, not part of Innisfil's costs. And so again, my question goes back to, can you guarantee that that bridge is going to stay? It's not going to be a grade level crossing.
Through your worship to Councillor Waters, I can't guarantee it. I think council can do more of the guarantees than what I can, but certainly from a staff perspective, from what I know on this project, that crossing, there has been no discussion whatsoever about that crossing becoming a grade level crossing. It is of primary importance to the orbit vision and to that EA process that's been undertaken to date, that grade separation will remain.
I'll just make one last comment, is that there's been no discussions of it changing, because we all assumed that the center of mass was incorporated into that. So now that that's not there, I'm sure those discussions are going to come up. So just a word of warning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Other questions or comments from members of council? I have a couple. Just about growth in the area particularly, and the way that we're incorporating it. And so if you go back, and I think many of you have heard me say this before, in 1980, which for me isn't that long ago, Vaughan had 25,000 people, and today they have 325-ish. So, and the last thing in the world we want is to grow like a Vaughan or a Mississauga. We are going through the MCR process right now with the province, and it's the Simcoe County is the lead through the MCR, the Municipal Comprehensive Review process. And Councillor Ossati attended the last meeting with me, and just to give you an example of what we can do by having the orbit and a protected major transit station area is the consultants are busy with their population projections and their land needs assessment for each of the 16 member municipalities of Simcoe County. And not surprisingly, ourselves, Bradford, and New Tecumseh are the ones with the most projected growth. And when you put that growth on the land needs assessment, and I don't have the exact numbers, it's in the report, but we all ended up with approximately the same number of units. In New Tecumseh and Bradford, in order to build the number of units, they needed somewhere around 400 or 500 hectares of land that would have to be absorbed to build what they're building. We're building about the same number of units with 73 hectares. And that's what this whole process has been about. It's been about protecting some of our traditional neighborhoods, protecting our local food and our agriculture, and absorbing our growth in a protected major transit station area where they have transit available and it's a walkable community. And that is still the vision that we have. And we'll continue to work with both Metrolinx and the developers to continue in that direction. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the recommendation is in front of you. I do not have a seconder. I need a seconder. Could I have one, please? Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? That is carried. Next was item C8. Councillor Nicol, and do you have a seconder, Councillor?
I have no changes to the recommendation, so if I have a seconder, Councillor Ossati, thank you. Just a few comments, if I might. When I originally saw this, I thought this would be a great resource to add a wellness center to Innisfil. This would treat many conditions, and I thought this was an ideal setting out on the outskirts of town, similar to the Greenstone facility in Muskoka or the one that was mentioned in Aaron as well. Those are, around the same 30-bed facilities. Some valid concerns have been raised by the community, including the ratio of those dropped off, as well as the number of staff as well at the location out in the country, which made me question this a bit as well. Proposing to change the bylaw from 6 to 25 residents seemed to be a bit of a lot without proper supervision. In the response matrix, it is stated that residents are not permitted to leave the property, but I did wonder, how can 1 or 2 staff members at night stop 1 or more should they choose to leave? And truthfully, how do 65 cameras really stop someone from leaving? I did research about the Aaron location, which is similar. And although it's not quite as isolated and secluded from rural residences like in the countryside as this one, I cannot find any complaints of any problems experienced in that community at all. As it was stated tonight, if this is to be a more luxury center, that should alleviate some of the problems and concerns as well, since the people that are utilizing this center are there voluntarily for wellness and are not sent there against their will. For these reasons, I've come to the conclusion that I think this would be a great type of facility to have in Innisfil, as long as it provides the amenities and security required to properly serve those utilizing it, as well as to put to ease the concerns of the community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. I too have quite a few concerns about this proposal, and I think the delegation tonight, Mr. Meneguzzi, he brought up a lot of valid points, and I wonder if maybe we can discuss some of them to see if there's a way that they can be considered. As far as the zoning goes, I was wondering, without this change, is the residential rural able to have a group home on it with the 6 people?
Ms. Witt or Mr. Montgomery, whoever wants to answer.
No worries, I can take this one, Steve. So through your worship to Councillor Ices, as part of the rural residential zoning, a group home up to 6 residents is permitted on the property as it is.
So if I could follow up, if this is approved to 25 residents, does that become the new number for any residential rural property to have a group home with that many people?
Whoever wants to answer.
Through you, your worship, to Councillor Ices, no, this is a site-specific rezoning, would only apply to 4136 third line.
Okay. And when it comes to a lot of the things in the report about, how many people are allowed there and how many staff, how does the town intend to monitor those numbers to enforce those limits?
Who wants to take that one?
Through your worship again, it would be through, my understanding would be through bylaw enforcement, enforcing the provisions of the zoning bylaw would be how it would occur.
Mr. Deloitte, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just want to say that there's a operational side to this, and there's a physical space in the building, and we've inspected the property and checked it for compliance and health and safety. So there is a capacity to the building, a physical capacity. So between the bylaw enforcement and the physical capacity of the building, we're certain that the occupancy will be as stated in the application.
So I do have concerns over that. I think the history of this property was spelled out possibly in the past. Originally, it was a farm severance where the lot was severed off a farm, and so it was a farmhouse. And as it got passed from owner to owner to owner, they put more money into it, expanded it. We know some of that was done without a permit, but those issues have been dealt with. So we have a new owner that sees a strong business opportunity with $25,000 is what we heard per month, maybe per person. So there is an incentive to put more people in this large facility, and so there isn't the restrictions on that. If it's bylaw, then it's really a complaint issue that would trigger that. So I'm not sure that's the intention of having the limits, is just to wait for the neighbors to complain and have bylaw in there. So I have concerns with that. I have concerns about the size of the property. Agriculture is on all sides of it. There are no buffers. Farm operations are happening within a few meters of the lot boundaries. You have people from all over the province living there. There's just a lot of cause for concern, and Mr. Meneguzzi, who talked about the possibility of staging this, implementing a phased approach to this amendment. Is that something that we've done in the past where we can have a phase-in period where we can monitor how it's going with this application?
Mr. Deloy?
I'm not familiar with any history along that line, and Stephen can help me out, but typically when you're dealing with a rezoning, the applicant comes forward, we investigate the property, the building. We don't get into their operational plans per se, but we have a good understanding of what they're proposing. So at that point, we're recommending approval of this. Having a temporary use regulation versus a rezoning, the same enforcement rules apply. So you're dead even either way. And so having a temporary use and then having them come back in 3 years and ask again, just seems counterproductive. It's cautious, but I think the enforcement piece is tied to the extensive site plan agreements that we're entering into with the owner, and we do have the enforcement ability. So staff do not see a need to go with a temporary approach, but that's up to council to decide. Thank you.
Perhaps one more comment. In my term of council, I have run into instances with different zonings where they were situations like this where a property has changed its use, a zoning got changed, and there wasn't proper buffers in place. Was there any consideration for buffers for the agricultural activity that is around this property?
Who wants to take that one?
I can. Sure. Through your worship, to Councillor Ices, maybe a question back to you would just be, what type of buffering are you looking for, as in like setback buffering, or there's fencing around the property, there's a lot of vegetation around the property. So just to clarify what you mean by buffering per se.
Yes, if I'm a little clear on that, and if I'm thinking with my agricultural hat on, equipment that drives around the field, it causes dust. When harvest season comes, there's residue that comes out the back of the machine. That those machines are going to run right now meters away from the tennis court that's there. When there's only a few people there, and if it's a rural residence, there's a exception that is normal. I'm not sure if you have, a resident who's in for treatment, who's not used to being in an area with this activity around it. Are we saying that that's going to be not going to be a problem? So can there be a setback? Can there be some sort of barriers around to deal with those concerns?
Mr. Deloitte?
So, Your Worship, the folks that are going to be occupying this are our neighbors and people from other cities, and people understand that in the rural area there is agriculture activities. The people are here for wellness. This isn't really a planning issue we're talking about, and we're not expecting anyone to wander, into an active agricultural operation. So that's not expected. So we don't see a need for any buffers or special fencing. It's like any rural resident respects the adjoining operations. We could, Your Worship, put a notice in the agreement that from time to time there will be nearby, agricultural operations that create noise and dust, and that should be expected. So we can do that.
My concern is, as Mr. Meneguzzi has said in his delegation, the 2 acres that we're putting the residents on is not the same as the other examples of group homes that we see. It was 40 acres, it was 100 acres. And it just, to me, it just doesn't quite fit. So I am concerned about that, and for that reason I cannot support this application.
Thank you. Did I see your hand, Ms. Witt?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. I was just going to also add to it, just with the potential issues of residents coming in who aren't familiar with agricultural operations. The owner, Angie, has offered to do, as part of the intake assessment, kind of an information session with agricultural uses and kind of the harmful things that could happen with agricultural uses surrounding the property if the residents were to leave the property or whatnot. So to inform them of agricultural practices happening around them. So that's just for council's knowledge.
Thank you. Other questions and comments? Councillor Waters?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question. I understand we have inspections on the physical plant and the physical buildings and the property. Are there any other inspections that are required for a wellness center? So in terms from other agencies, health agencies that would inspect the facilities, just make sure that they're abiding by best practices?
Ms. Witt?
Yep, through you, Mayor Dolan, to Councillor Waters. So in this case, we've asked for Accreditation Canada to give accreditation to the facility. So I believe they have already done a few inspections on site, and perhaps the applicant could speak to what exactly they are inspecting, but I believe it's emergency exits, that type of thing, mostly under the building code, but potentially there's more things that they inspect as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I share the concern about the agricultural operation, only that we've seen people build a house close to a golf course and then complain about golf balls that come into the backyard. So There's no opportunity for complaint against right to farm or minimum distance separation or any of that. Is that somehow built in, that somehow it could turn around a few years from now that the 25 residents or that home complain about the agricultural operation causing trouble? Councillor Ices, can you answer that?
Not specifically with regards to that. There is obviously a right to farm. I guess I just see such a huge increase from 6, which is they could have a group home right there with 6 people, and we're allowing 25. And what's the reasoning for that? Just because, and I can't deny the need for mental health. But this is kind of a resort mental health thing that they can have that in multiple places, and you won't have these conditions where, we have these concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Ices, but my experience has been no matter where you put this, there will be somebody who will have a reason that they don't want it there. Unfortunately, it's just, we've been through it so many times with other uses that people might be a little bit afraid of, but I hear your concerns.
Yeah, it's not the use, it's the number of people.
Oh, okay. Can I ask about temporary zoning? So I guess from what I'm understanding that, it's the fear of the unknown, right? And what if? So if there was temporary zoning and then there was no issues for set period of time, then could a permanent zoning put on it? Or alternatively, could the zoning go with the current owner? I guess you can't do that, can you? Because I'm wondering about, might have the very best intentions and the very best owner in the world, but 5 years ago they sell to somebody and then issues erupt, and what are our options at that point? Mr. Montgomery?
To you, Mayor Dolan. The issue of transference of ownership, unfortunately, we can't control that. Once property is zoned, it is zoned. That is correct. It is zoned basically as long as it's zoned. Temporary use is, I'm not familiar of the use of a temporary use bylaw for a use like this. It is something that could potentially be considered as an alternative by staff, followed by a permanent rezoning as a trial. And I'm sorry, what was your next question?
Yeah, I think you already answered it. You
okay.
Can't, the zoning can't go with a. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments before we call the vote? So it's been duly moved and seconded. All in favor of the recommendation? Those opposed? That's carried. Next, we go to item E2, and that was Councillor Fowler.
Need a seconder, please, to pull this up. Thank you, Councillor Van Berkel. First thing I want to say is that I appreciate all the effort that our staff has put into this. I know we've, in essence, put them between a rock and a hard place. There's no perfect solution. There's no perfect answer. And to take care of the troublemakers who are causing a lot of the situations in town, we have to punish the people that follow the rules. So this is a no-win situation. This is, in this scenario, what I'm looking at is the long term. I'm looking at the bylaw, and a lot of things come to mind, like just things that are not enforceable. Section 7 for guest caps. They're saying the maximum limit overnight is 2 people per sleeping room to a maximum of 10 guests. I'm sorry, if 4 people show up in a car, you can't verify it. Responsible person in Section 8, when it comes down to it, you've got to try to call somebody who may either be passed out or not paying attention to their phone, or their phone could be elsewhere, or any number of things. There could be a legitimate reason why they don't answer. And so that, again, is something that's not enforceable. Another thing that comes to mind, and this is just my personal feelings on the matter, is that our bylaw it's a recipe for a perfect storm. You have an overcrowded house full of people that are not respecting other people's boundaries. They could be imbibing alcohol or whatever substance legally that they can have access to. And two of our employees, our town employees, go to this house at 2 o'clock in the morning to try to talk to them because they're causing a ruckus to about 8 other houses in the area. What happens if something goes wrong? They get violent. I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable putting our employees, even though they're trained in de-escalation techniques, in a situation like that. And then let's say it's 2:30 in the morning now, all of a sudden we have the police get called because our bylaw officers are off duty. Well, they're saying specifically they're going to triage. So if there's a car accident where, people are injured, the house is going to get put aside. So the issue is not going to get resolved. When we come down to fining, if a person makes $2,000 a night, they get fined $1,000 every time they come. If they come one time a night, they're still coming ahead $1,000 a night. If they go to fight it and it goes, say, to a justice of the peace to get a higher fine, they're not going to stop until it goes to court. And the fact is, with COVID and everything else, the system is backed up. So how much longer are the people in the surrounding areas going to have to endure this when they look at the town and say, well, you have a bylaw, enforce it? It's putting them in a situation that no matter what they do, they're going to be wrong. I appreciate every effort they put into this, but there's nothing that can be done at this moment in time. I'd suggest waiting for the Oro-Medonte situation to resolve itself. See where that goes. Once it was a comment that was made earlier tonight, once something gets put in motion, it can't be removed. You can't unring that bell. So if it comes down to putting a bylaw in effect that is going to, one, be unenforceable, two, put our employees in harm's way, and three, not resolve it accordingly in a timely fashion, this is something I can't stand behind. I can't do it. So I'm sorry. It's as much as effort as ever went into it. It's just, we need something with more teeth. We need something to tackle the significant disruptions of the people, like the limited number of people that are causing the greatest amount of harm. And then on top of this, you're telling people, hey, I know you've got your bed and breakfast. I know you have your little STA, and you're over here and you follow the rules and you clean up your garbage and your lawn's kept and there's no noise complaints and everyone's respectful. But because somebody over there is having a frat party, you now have to pay $350 a year on top of that. These are people that are making a living, subsidizing their wages. And if they're not disturbing the neighborhood, they're being punished by the people that are. So I'm sorry, I like the idea. I love the effort. I love the intent, but it's got no teeth. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Fowler, you're saying status quo? You don't, because like this is the issue we have, is we're at a point now, we either have to try something or try nothing, but we can't just, if we're sending it back to staff and saying, no, we don't like it, we have to give them direction and like what we do want. What is the solution? What do we want them to do? We can't just keep sending it back, have them work on it for 6 months and say no, and then send it back again. We have to give them direction on what this council wants them to bring forward. Councillor Waters?
I'm with Councillor Fowler on this. I think, and I agree with yourself, Mayor, that we have to give them some direction. So I think that following Blue Mountain's lead in terms of where, when they went through the process of seeing what they could do and what they couldn't do, they found out that areas which were resort-like, high density, were places for STAs. I think Friday Harbor can manage their own stuff, and they could have either whole house or owner residents there running that. I think that's fine. But I'm totally against whole home STAs in neighborhoods. A neighborhood is residential. You cannot have a fully commercial building right next door that allows, it's basically a mini hotel next door. So I would like staff to go back and see whether or not we can follow something up that looks like Blue Mountains, and hopefully by that time maybe Oro Modante's case will have gone through the courts, or appeal have gone through the courts. So I'm looking for something that says Friday Harbor, yes. Okay, most of Alcona or core areas of Innisfil, which have high density, have residential use. Whole homes, no. Places I can live with bed and breakfasts. I do it all the time in Niagara on the Lake because the homeowner's there. In whole home, the homeowner's not there. It's a hotel in a commercial use in a residential zone. So I'm not for that. Our Shores is a bit of a mixed bag, and so I'm not too sure what we could do there. But I was kind of hoping staff would be able to come back with recommendations that could maybe help regulate that better. But at least in most of Alcona, I think we have like 45 STAs right now that are whole home in core neighborhoods. They don't belong there. And I think because it's black and white, they're not allowed there. I think we would have a good case to take to court if we had to take them to court to help stop that business going on. So I'm with Councillor Fowler. I think we need to send it back to staff and take a stronger look at what happened in Blue Mountain, and also that will give us some time to hear what happens in Oro Medonte. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Louise from legal to see. My understanding is Blue Mountain isn't working, just from talking to Mayor Soever, but Louise, did you have any comments on whether or not what Councillor Waters is proposing is legally doable?
I appreciate the comments, Councillor Waters, and I think that if you're going to give that direction to staff, I defer to Mr. Deloy, but I think that giving staff the opportunity to look at limited bans on certain uses within certain zones might be an appropriate recommendation for council to come back. And that would also give staff the opportunity to look at that Oro Medonte decision and the jurisdictional issues around the municipality's authority to implement either a whole ban on STAs across the town, or certain STAs in certain zones, or certain types of STAs. There's a number of levels of ban that council might want staff to consider or comment on.
Mr. Deloy?
Your Worship, the last fall and on April 20th, we had a very good public meetings, and there were a lot of views. Clearly, there's a healthy tension between those who want to rent their cottages or buildings or rooms and those who want some control or prefer not to have them. So that's fairly typical in my experience over the last 5 years with these kinds of uses. So here we are. We've completed our homework. We've done a lot of research, and we've got the bylaws before you tonight that would augment the property standards bylaw, the noise bylaws, that kind of thing. My third point is that the status quo, we need to think about that. Our status quo is that we have no control or restrictions on short-term accommodations right now. And the result of that is we have over 300 active short-term accommodations. So just understand that any lack of control will continue this, and that number is expected to grow as we've seen in other municipalities. So having said that, we've got some recommended bylaws to create some licensing regime and some enforcement activities. I'm not defending those particularly. We're satisfied they'll do the job and get us on the path to having some modicum of control over short-term accommodations. I agree with Louise. We should be very clear if you want a revised bylaw and start restricting it geographically. I think that's unusual, and we've got a range. It should apply across the whole town. So anyhow, we would appreciate any specific direction, but and we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Just before we go, I'm going to get to everybody, but I just want to clear up a couple of items from last week. So first of all, was there was an assertion that if there's a use allowed, that the what was it called, the 440, the injunction would not be available to us because it was a permitted use. Ms. Verbosch, can you answer that question?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I can try to respond to it. Without having spoken to Mr. Knox directly, the assertion, as I understand it, was that Section 440 injunctions would not be available to the town once the use was permitted. I did a thorough review of case law regarding Section 440. There are two lines of authority. And most recently, the cases out of the city of Windsor with respect to the bridge blockades seem to adopt an approach that courts actually, where a municipality seeks an injunction under Section 440 for the enforcement of the bylaw, courts are supportive of municipalities trying to do that. And so the test for applying a Section 440 injunction is actually less stringent on municipalities. I didn't find anything in those cases that suggested, as Mr. Knox seemed to assert, and my apologies if I've mischaracterized his assertion, but nothing to support the fact that that injunction wouldn't be available to us as an enforcement tool.
Thank you. And one other question then, if this bylaw went through and it totally failed, it had the unintended effects that people think it might, what could we, like Councillor Fowler said earlier that we couldn't undo it. Can we undo it?
Through you, Madam Mayor. I don't think it's with respect to the licensing bylaw failing, but it might be with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment failing. And for that, I'll defer to Mr. Deloitte.
Mr. Deloitte?
So the short answer is yes. Council has the ability to pass bylaws and to rescind bylaws, be they licensing bylaws or other bylaws. Right now, we have over 300 of these throughout the town. So you can withdraw it and the licensing regime would disappear, but then that would leave a vacuum, a policy and licensing vacuum, and we'd be back to point of origin.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go to hands now. I'm sorry to interject. Councillor Van Berkel, then Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have to agree with Councillor Fowler. Some of my concerns are the same as his, but also, you know what? Who polices this? It's the neighbors that police it, and it's going to cause bad feelings between neighbors. It's a good thing we just passed that bylaw, because you know that's what's going to happen. And I've seen it, and you've seen it, and everybody else has seen it. You know, with things that are happening on the street, whether somebody is using their yard for storage or something like that, and the neighbors complain, and it's just an ongoing thing. So that's one of my concerns. The other one of my concerns is the MAT tax. And the reason it's a concern, because last year I made arrangements in the township of South Bruce Peninsula to go with my fifth wheel and stay there for a week or so. And there was no MAT tax. Now I got a letter from them that says effective January 1st, 2002, the township of South Bruce Peninsula imposed a 4% mandatory municipal accommodation tax, MAT, applicable on all short-term accommodations for a continuous period of 30 days or less. This MAT tax will also be subject to HST. So does that mean that KOA and everybody else is going to have to pay MAT tax? And I phoned him up and I said, well, he says even the marinas, some of these big boats in marinas, where people, you know, take them out, put them back in and stay in a marina for 30 days or 2 days or they have to pay the mat tax because they leave their slip and come back in. So I need an understanding of this. Is it just for short-term rentals, or is it for the RVs and boats and everything else? Because this is going to open the can of worms as well. Which we weren't told, just a mat tax on short-term rentals. But apparently we can put that on everything. Here it is right here. I mean, I'm not. So they're double taxing you. They're taxing your HST on a mat tax. So I don't think that's very fair. That's one of my concerns as well. So other than that, I think that Councillor Fowler had some very, very valid points. And I think Mr. Geller, who pointed out some of the things that he was in agreement with, were very valid. So I'd have to agree with, I don't think I can vote for this bylaw the way it is right now. I would like to see some of the changes where maybe we can, real party houses where there's no owner available, that we can do something with them differently. And that's basically what happens all along the shore. The whole house is rented out instead of, bed and breakfast. And I think those are the places that we have to make secure bylaws for, bylaws that are going to work, bylaws that have teeth in them, and not the neighbors policing it. Those are my comments, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Berkel. I just wanted to point out that there's no mat tax in this bylaw. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Your Worship, but it was mentioned, and I'm sure if the town of Innisfil can figure out a way to get some more money, a mat tax will come on.
Thank you. Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's surprising with the discussion of the council tonight. Clearly, this has taken years just to get to here, and we truly need to regulate these, just as every other community around is trying to do as well. As with anything, there are some good operators and some that may not be as good. We have some homes or cottage owners that are making some extra money and some investors who are running businesses. I read the numerous letters that we received from our residents, some of whom are looking for even stronger restrictions, along with some of the usual form letters, and even the one from Airbnb itself, who believes that the proposed bylaw is too restrictive. I think the key point for me and for everybody should be that what they made, item 7 in their letter was they're merely a conductor between two individuals, and to go on to state that even their regulations and registration, it's the municipality who has to remain responsible for the full enforcement of the measures in place, which would include their rules along with our own. So we are the ones to enact the rules our residents are asking for, while not losing the essence of the recreational community we all live in. It's taken some time, but I think staff have found a good balance to get a handle on the nuisance hosts while not unfairly punishing our responsible residents who wish to rent out their home. I think putting this off any longer, it's already been so many years that we've been dealing with this, and we need to get something started. I hope that council will consider that rather than just letting this continue on the Wild West. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to ask Mr. Deloitte a question. And when you have a residential zone, residential, how can you justify allowing a full business, i.e. a whole house, in that zone? Like if I wanted to open up a pizza, we would be okay with that. So I guess I know we do allow small business corner stores, but I'm just saying, how do we allow a full-fledged profit-making business in the middle of a neighborhood?
Your Worship, we wouldn't, I think, is the short answer. The bylaws before council tonight would not allow that. The intent of the bylaws is to maintain the residential character of the neighborhood, and the regulations on the maximum number of nights and the 90 and 180 days per year, depending on location, does distinguish short-term accommodations from full-on commercial use.
I guess my question is, if that house is only used for profit, that's all it's used there for, even though it may only be used, for 3 months, 5 months a year, it's basically there as a commercial business in a residential zone. So it should not be allowed. And I think in the statistics, it said 98% of all the STAs in Innisfil are whole house. And so I guess my question is that, you know, in Friday Harbor, I'm okay with it because that's what it was designed for. And, you know, Innisfil does have a history along the lakefront with cottages. But when people have 2 or 3 or 4, like I understand cottage owners wanting to rent out their cottages for part of the year to make a little bit of money to help pay for taxes. But when somebody owns 3 or 4, it becomes something. It becomes a different animal. And as many of the cottagers who live beside these STAs on the lakefront, the people who go there don't use the property appropriately. They have sea-doos, they're loud, they're all over the place, which makes danger for for their homeowners with kids in the waterway. So I just can't see. Like I said, I'm okay with where residents are there living on site and allowing it to happen. I think that's okay. But it's the whole house, and considering it 98% our whole house is something we need to put a halt to in normal neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to totally agree with you. And I think that everyone in this council wants exactly the same thing. We all want to stop those party houses while not impinging on the people who follow the rules. What we can't seem to get to is how to get there. Nobody has found a way to get there. Oromodonte thought they had a way to get there, and the OMB OLT chair ruled against them orally. Now, there may be appeal to that. She's not even going to get to a written decision for a few months. So that appeal could be in 2025. So I guess what I'm saying is we all know where we want to go, and we all want to go to exactly the same place. What we're struggling with and what staff are struggling with is how to get there. If you say, we'll do the shoreline here, the next house over that's out of that, group will be the party house. Or there's one on Leslie Drive that the whole house is empty except a disco ball in the living room, and it's where kids go to party. So it's not just the shoreline, there's some in town as well, but it's just trying to find how to get there. And everybody's looking. Like, honestly, there is not a municipality in Canada that isn't, or the US probably, that isn't trying to thread this needle. And so far, nobody has been able to do that. Okay, I'll get off my high horse now. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. And I apologize to council and to the public with the trouble with the computer tonight, but we seem to have it fixed now. So I do apologize. Okay, I did take I'm concurring with council on all of this, but I did take time out today to make some phone calls. I spoke to staff. I also spoke to Chief Fletcher today. And we have bylaws in place, and I agree they're good. Some of them maybe we could make a little stronger. Noise bylaws, contact information, we can make it that, let's make it stronger. We can do that with our bylaws. Garbage, if you're going to put out 17 bags of garbage after a weekend at one of these party houses, and I'm trying to I'll get to the point, parking limitations on the property. I understand you can only pave so much percentage of your front lawn for cars. You have to leave a certain amount of turf. If people are parking on the turf, they're breaking the law and the bylaws that we already have in place. And in this proposal tonight, they spoke of a demerit point. I'm totally against the demerit point. And in speaking with the chief, I said, you know what, if we don't pass this bylaw tonight, you know what, why don't we go to zero tolerance for the next 6 months or until we come up with a bylaw? You have an Airbnb, that's a party house, you're making noise, you're over parking, you're not taking care of the garbage. We cannot contact you. I think we should make a bylaw for contact information for the current STAs. I feel like calling them STDs, but just crazy. So, and the chief thought this was a great idea. We'll do, if our bylaw officers, and we don't want to put them in jeopardy, If they go to a house, they get a call. It's 1 o'clock in the morning or 12 o'clock, and it's 10 guys and one girl sitting in a car or one guy. They can call South, and the chief said this verbatim. They can call us and we'll get there. And if they're breaking the law, and we go with zero tolerance, no thing like the COVID, first time educate, second time educate, third time educate. You're breaking the law, you're getting a ticket. You broke 4 laws, you're getting 4 tickets. And I think if we did that for the next 6 months or until we come up with a substantial collectively Airbnb rule across Ontario or something. And the other thing I brought up is our fines are like popcorn to a lot of these people. It's like going to a show and paying $27 for a bowl of popcorn. Our fines are not enough. I approached our member of provincial parliament and said, how can we increase these fines? Well, you know what? The province doesn't want to increase fines right now because it's an election year. But in 8 months, that could change. And we approached the province and say, these $500 fines, that's popcorn. Make it $1,500, make it $2,500, make it $5,000. Because some of these people are getting $2,000 a night. She rents it out 340 nights a year. You add the math, making damn good money, 400,000 plus a year. So our fines by the province, we need to get approval to increase those fines. But in the meantime, we suggest that we're going to have a zero tolerance if you break any of our bylaws. And I think that's something we can hammer out over the next few weeks. But passing this bylaw, from what I've listened to from the public and my phone calls, I think we're just opening a can of worms. So I'll concur with council and say, we need to defer this until we have more information, but maybe in the interim, we can look at our bylaws and really bring them up to speed. And we nail them. We nail the party houses. We're not going to interfere with people that are just trying to make a living. And that's just my rant for tonight.
Thank you, Deputy. So I'll expect for somebody who is of that mind to come up with a amended recommendation and with very specific about what you're asking staff to do. So you're saying this isn't good enough. What is it you want staff to do? So, I agree. Is this perfect? Absolutely not. Is it a start? Yeah, it's something. Can we tweak it? If we need to tweak it, absolutely we can tweak it. We wouldn't ever ask any of our staff to go into a party house at 2 o'clock in the morning. They wouldn't have to. They would get the evidence by going by that was noise and it was a party. That house would get a demerit point. When they went 3 demerit points later, they don't get a license the next year. Somebody goes to rent their house on Air, they wouldn't get they wouldn't have a license number, so Airbnb wouldn't put them up on the site. So I agree that it's not nearly perfect. Nobody's got it perfect. I keep hearing, oh, such and such a town has got it all figured out, so I call such and such a town. No, they don't have it all figured out. They got more complaints than ever. We can't simply ban something. We can try, just like we try to ban fireworks. We all know how that works. So we have to try to do something. And I guess what makes me most think that we've kind of hit the right balance with this is I've gotten a ton of emails from people, the party houses included, the whole houses on the lake with the 10 bedrooms, who are absolutely against us doing this. Don't you do this. If you do this, I'll have to sell my house. It's going to tank the market in all of Innisfil. And then I've got people who absolutely abhor them, want them completely prohibited, don't want an Airbnb anywhere, unless of course it's the one they own at the ski hill. That they don't want anyone anywhere, and they don't like this bylaw. So what that tells me is you've got the party houses that absolutely hate the bylaw, and then you've got the ones who hate the party houses hate the bylaw. You know me, if everybody's equally unhappy, you must have kind of hit the balance. So I guess I want to do something. I just don't want to go through another summer of the same old, that we've done nothing and we start all over again. I want to at least be able to say we tried to fix this. And if it doesn't work, fine, we try something else and we pull back, but it doesn't make them legal. It doesn't give them any special jurisdiction. If we rescind the bylaw and no longer offer the license, we're no more the worse off. I don't think we can make it any worse. Councillor Orsatti, Councillor Nicol, Councillor Waters, Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Your Worship. A very hot topic, and it certainly is in the community as well. But, you know, I look at this when I was reading the report, and I think we've all been back and forth to staff, peppered them with our questions and everything else. And so, you know, there's been a lot of questions, and staff have invested a lot of time in this. They've included the stakeholders involved in this in a community, the police, the fire, the bylaw, our legal department, and input from other municipalities to provide council with the information that we need. But, you know, when we look at in the market today and the change over the pandemic, we got skyrocketing house prices, lack of rental homes on the market, and the increase in short-term accommodations across Ontario. And it's resulted in a need to control this. So it is only going to get worse as people are buying up more homes, not to provide someone with a rental for a year to live in it, but to start charging out these $870 to $1,000 rentals because they think that this is a great business, as Councillor Waters said. And I agree with you, Your Worship. We need to have something in place. And staff have put together a plan that's a phased in plan. This isn't about a punishment for current homeowners renting their properties that live in them for short stays and respectful of their neighbors, but a way to control a saturation in the market for now and the growing one that's going to come for the future. And I think the restriction on the number of properties per homeowner for the purposes and allowing corresponding fines that have been recommended. Deputy Mayor, you're talking about, you know, having larger fines. Staff are recommending in a bylaw $1,000 and even having ones that are larger that would require the court. So increasing, you're fined $1,000, you didn't do that, you get another hit the next time. Those don't hit the hardworking resident that's living in their home, renting out for the couple days. It hits the ones that are really in this for financial gain. And I agree. We need to come up if council is saying, okay, rather than just letting this ride and let's push it off again or the next council to solve it. What recommendations are you making for an amendment to this? Is there a tweak that you like, or are you saying scrap the whole thing because just let it stay status quo? Because we've all agreed status quo isn't working. That's my input.
Thank you, Councillor Nicol. Then Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Councillor Orsatti. I think you nailed every point perfectly. I'm actually stunned here after so many weeks and months of discussing this topic that so many members of council have now changed their tune completely. I've heard council members saying that we need to get a handle of this and we need to stop this now. And now they're talking about, oh, maybe we should just get more police involvement. We have an opportunity here to start something to try and get control over this. And for that matter, I'm requesting a recorded vote for all of this because I want to remember who voted on this topic when we have an opportunity right now to get a handle on short-term accommodations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Councillor Orsatti was helping me make my point around affordability, but then it somehow got twisted somewhere in there. So I may have misunderstood what she was saying, but whether or not she's for or against these bylaws. If 98% of all the houses being rented are whole house rentals for STAs, imagine that that's 98% of the people that people who can't afford houses or who can just barely afford a house are not allowed, can't get into the market because these people are overbidding on these houses in order to make a huge, because they can do it because they can make a huge profit on them in terms of their annual income. So not only are we allowing commercial business in residential areas, we're also not helping our affordability issue around these houses when 98% of them are whole house rentals. So what I'm asking for is that I understand we need to have some sort of bylaws to help regulate this, but where I'm having problems is that are the whole house units. Now, I've said that, you know, Friday Harbor, I'm okay because it's a resort. Let them do that. I will say I'm a bit fuzzy on what we would do with our shores pieces in terms of how we handle that, whether it's a way of limiting the number like a single owner can own or rent out. I don't know if that's doable, but I think banning out and out whole houses in the other 45 or in the core of Innisfil and Cookstown and other locations is something that would make residents happy. It would help the affordability issue in terms of people are not going to be able to say, because as soon as we pass this bylaw, everyone's going to say, it's okay to have STAs in Innisfil. Let's start buying some more houses, and the prices are going to go up further. You know, no one's ever going to be able to afford a house in Innisfil because it has that touristy aspect to it. So what I'm saying is that, you know, I think yes, we need to have some regulation, but it's the whole house ones that I have an issue with. That these are commercial operations in a residential area, except for Friday Harbor. You know, and like I said, I am still fuzzy around our shore how we would do that. But I agree, we need to do something. But whole house commercial operations in residential areas is not acceptable for me. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Penticana to jump in here because from what I understand, the whole house number is right. But some of them are a person who lives in Toronto who owns a cottage and has owned a cottage in Innisfil for 60 years. That is a whole house, and they might rent that out, you know, in the wintertime when they're not there or something. The ones we want to target, and I think we all agree on this, is the numbered companies that don't live here, own 4 or 5 houses and use them as a business. But because personally, I don't have a problem if somebody owns a cottage in Innisfil and has owned it for centuries or decades and decides they want to rent it out for a week in the summer to help cover the taxes. That's a whole house rental, but that's to me not a commercial business. But I'll ask Mr. Penticana if he can break that down any further.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and to Councillor Waters and his concerns. I think the way that this bylaw and the licensing bylaw is structured, I think it is structured in a way with the night limits and the principal residency requirement to really address that concern of the whole house rentals and an entire home within a neighborhood being operated 365 every day of the year as a short-term rental. And that's why the 180-day night limit, if you're not on the waterfront, that's in place. The principal residency requirement, that's in place for the properties that aren't on the waterfront. So in the case of Councillor Waters with his concern of a whole house in a neighborhood within Alcona, those night limits within the licensing bylaw should help address those concerns. And in the case where there may be a numbered company, like Mayor suggested, and they have 3 or 4 properties and they're renting those whole houses, the limit of the licensing bylaw that each owner can only operate 1 STA, that should also help address that concern as well. So yeah, hopefully I was somewhat clear with that, but generally the night limits and the principal residency requirements on non-waterfront properties, that should help address those concerns. Thank you.
Follow up, Councillor Waters?
Yes, this is the 180 days, that's 6 months, that's half a year. So from basically spring, summer, fall, you're basically can have a party house there. And during the wintertime, you'll get a break from the parties. More likely, they're not rented that much during the wintertime. So I think that's a false argument as far as I'm concerned. And I agree with you, Mayor, that cottage owners who want to rent out, I have no problem with. They've been doing it for years, and they want to make sure that they're that when they go up there, they're not going to hear from their neighbors. But again, it's ones where people are buying them for strictly a profit, driving the affordability prices up, and operating 4 or 5 of them as just profit generators, and they're not concerned about the the neighborhoods. They're not concerned about Innisfil. To say that they're driving tourists and they're concerned about tourism in Innisfil, I don't buy that at all. I think they're purely profit motivated, and I think that we have to do something about those whole house. But again, I agree with you. The cottages which people have owned for years, I can empathize with that, because I know my nieces used to own a place up on Moon River, and during the summertime they would rent out for 3 or 4 weeks a year to help pay the taxes. I can understand that. It's the other ones I have an issue with. Thank you.
Absolutely, it's 1,000%. We're all exactly on the same page as to what we want to stop. The trouble is, how do we do it? Councillor Ices, you haven't had any words yet, and then I'll go to Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Worship. Definitely a challenging issue, and I've listened to staff and seen the reports, and I listened to the concerns from council members who have problems with issues with this bylaw, and I have some real issues with it too. And if I go back to what there's just a handful of bad actors that we have in our town with these short-term accommodations. So our answer to getting them to stop being the bad actors, we're going to ask them to get a license, and then we're going to ask them to get inspected, and then they're going to pay a fee, and then they'll get a license, and then we're creating this huge bureaucracy. And if they get demerit points, then it's a huge long process, and it's not going to help the neighbor of these problem areas when there's a noise, when there's parties, when there's garbage. You're going to go to those people and say, well, they have a license, but they're only at 2 points now, so we got to wait till they get to their 3rd point before we can do anything. I think Deputy Mayor made a great point. We have bylaws for noise. We have bylaws for garbage. And when I hear that, we're a little bit scared to send people in there because it could be a dangerous situation, it's like, it feels to me that might becomes right. We can't do anything. But Deputy Mayor says we can. If we put a zero tolerance policy in, the bylaw that's on the floor tonight, if we can try that first before throwing this all out, because I know staff has put a lot of work into it. We're in this zone where other municipalities are having these legal challenges. I just think if we can enforce the laws we have and defer this, that we would be, we're definitely going to be doing something. The town will notice it, and perhaps that will solve some of these problems.
Thank you. I agree with you that it's on, a handful of houses, but the longer we stall and do nothing, that number is going to grow exponentially. Councillor Fowler?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Nicol. You actually beat me to the punch for the recorded vote tonight. This is actually something that is very important that I would like put on record for many people to seek in the future. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Davidson, Councillor Ices and Van Berkel, and Councillor Waters for reiterating the point that it's not the people that are doing right, it is those that are making everybody else look bad. The one thing that keeps on coming to mind when I look at the situation, and I put it in the most simplistic terms that maybe everyone can understand. Take a look at our parking situation during the summertime. We have people that come from out of town to take up a space that they have no concern or desire to maintain or care about the well-being of those people around them. And what have we done in the past? We've educated and tried to talk and reason with and find. So you got 4 people in a vehicle coming up from whatever town it may be. They come in, they get a $75 fine for a ticket. No problem. Well, 4 of them there, $20 a piece. That's a day out. I can go anywhere and off I go. What works is when you find them and then you tow their car, because all of a sudden now their money's gone, their vehicle's gone, they have to get to the vehicle and then they have to retrieve the vehicle. So the idea is it hits them so hard in the wallet that they think twice. That's the only thing they understand. So when you come into a situation where you have houses that are being used that disturb the neighbors, that leave the garbage, 9th Line. I sat down on a Sunday morning on 9th Line Beach watching as 2 people ride up continually on a 4-wheeler and dump the garbage right in front of the garbage cans. They don't care. What happens then? The neighbors complain, people call town, the town has to go out and fix it. Why? Because they don't care. Well, I don't care. It's not my problem. I pay the fine, off I go. You have to do something that hits them hard enough to make them think twice about disturbing the spaces they inhabit. The deputy mayor has it right. We have bylaws. We have a lot of bylaws, and we're all familiar with what they can do. Let's use them to our advantage. Let's hit the people so hard that when they step out of line, they know that they're not infringing upon the right of one household. They're infringing on the right of a town that they come to inhabit. And as much as I appreciate the work here, I really do. I think it's, considering what we've handed them town staff as tools and the limitations they have, they've done absolutely fabulous. However, in this situation, their hands are tied. Let's give them better tools. Let's use the bylaws we have. Let's enhance them. And let's have, again, as Deputy Mayor said, a zero tolerance. You want to put 5 cars on your lawn? Great. There's 5 tickets. You want to disturb the noise? Here's a bigger fine. Oh, we're coming back twice? Here's another fine. Do it as many times till the people get the message. If you're going to come here and you're going to disrupt the neighborhood with no care but your own, you will pay, period. That being said, I'm trying to figure out a way to put an amendment in. I may need some assistance with this. I would like to delay the implementation of the bylaw and come back with an alternative that uses the enhancement of our existing bylaws to enforce or quell the trouble party houses. Is there something we can do with that?
Mr. Jershow?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think on that suggestion, we have to be careful, because I think there's a distinction between whether we're trying to change the proposed rules in the bylaws or whether we're trying to enhance enforcement of existing rules that are already on the books. And I think, a number of members of council have mentioned the question of enforceability tonight. I hope it goes without saying that our bylaw team does their absolute best to enforce all of our bylaws. I think we will recognize that may not mean that every single incident is enforced at the time it occurs. There are limits to the resource of our enforcement team. So I think we just do need to be careful about whether the solution being proposed is a change to the rules or a change to the resourcing.
Thank you for that, Mr. Jershow. And also, we have to be very careful within our existing complement to manage expectations. So if we think that someone's going to call a bylaw and they're going to be there in 10 minutes, and then we better have a serious talk about how many bylaw officers we have on the street. I also sit on the police services board, and I know the restraints there as well. So something to consider when you're doing your revised recommendation. Sorry, Councillor Van Berkel, then Councillor Waters. And then we're going to move to some recommendation.
Thank you, Your Worship. Whether we pass this bylaw or not, one of my concerns is some of these cottages that used to have 3 bedrooms now have 5 or 6 bedrooms, and they're in septic systems. That to me is a concern too. They're right on the water, and I don't know if they're pumping them on time or whether it is pumping it into the lake or what. And I would really, like to separate them from the rest. Some of them are in sewers and water for sure, but the ones like in Houston or in Big Cedar or whatever, there's no sewers there. And I'm sure there's on Big Bay Point's the same problem. So all of a sudden, these 3-bedroom cottages where, was a family living there, it becomes 10 people on the weekend. And I think the overuse of their septic systems is a real possibility.
Thank you. Mr. Pentikainen, would the inspection of the under the STA license cover septic systems? I'm not sure if Mr. Pentikainen is there. So we'll get an answer for you for that, but I'll go to Councillor Waters.
I just want to make a point in terms of trying to move it forward. I said, I think what we're trying to do here is good in terms of, fines, better, certain more clear bylaws and what's allowed. I'm just asking, could we just defer it for 30 days and we say, staff, take it back and see when not, because my pet peeve right now is whole house, and a way of banning whole house operations, and trying to figure out, like, the biggest concern is our shores piece, and if there's a way to finesse that, that we can ban whole house, multiple units, so we allow the existing cottage owners still to rent it out. And the number of days which Mr. Pentikainen was talking about might work, but if we can just ask them to go away for 30 days and see when that they can tighten up the whole house piece, I would be preferable to that as opposed to throwing the whole thing out. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Gershow.
Thank you, Your Worship. So on the question of procedurally, where do we go from here? I think there is a distinction to be drawn between voting on the recommendation we have in front of us versus deferring the items. And I'll ask the clerk's office to support me on these points. But I think, there is a difference there. The challenge perhaps with a deferral, it's possible a number of members have talked about the Ormadante decision that's pending. As Louise mentioned earlier, that could take 2 to 3 months until that comes to be available. Let me be clear, deferral is an option. It is absolutely an option to council. What is less clear to me is I'm not sure I've heard a consensus from council on what recommendations or what revisions members of council would like to see. So, deferral, and we could kind of take this offline, so to speak, to see what plays out with the legal system, to have some further discussions around what, enforceability we can do under existing bylaws. Those are tools that are in our toolbox today. So obviously by not passing anything tonight, we're not adding tools to the toolbox, but we do have the tools we do have. So again, I hope I'm being helpful here, but we should draw a distinction between voting on the existing proposal versus simply deferring it. Deferral might allow for a bit more discussion, but it doesn't change anything either.
Thank you, Mr. Gershow. Perhaps maybe I can assist. So if it was amenable to refer back to staff to see if there's any additional or alternate ways to specifically target purpose-built or purpose, I don't know what you call them, the party houses. Did I see a hand?
No.
Councillor Fowler?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was thinking something along the same lines. If we could defer and give town staff the opportunity to investigate enhancing the tools we have in place to address the issues with the short-term accommodations, i.e. bylaws, I referred by staff to investigating existing tools available to town staff to address the short-term accommodation situation.
So you don't want them to look at any new tools, just existing tools?
We've talked about garbage, we've talked about noise, we've talked about parking, we've talked about maintenance of property, we've talked about if they hell, I mean, if they want to let their dogs run loose, fine them for that. Whatever it takes, whatever they do to break the existing laws that every other tax-paying citizen is required to follow in this town, make them understand that once they're on Innisfil land, they follow Innisfil rules. That's we have the tools in place for maintenance of order. We have them to maintain a sense of civility with our neighbors, and we're trying like that to make that amenable to everybody. But when someone comes in and flaunts the rules and feels that they don't have any repercussions or that they don't have any ability to be punished for it, then we alter it to make them aware of that mistake.
Okay, so Councillor Feller, I'm going to go to Mr. Vickers in charge of bylaw. So without any new resources, Mr. Vickers, I'm just wondering, it's not like they haven't been trying already, right? They get the calls from the neighbors, they go in, they knock on the door, they respond to every call they get. So it's not like they haven't been doing that. So I'm wondering where all of a sudden we're going to have all this extra power to enact that because we have been being too soft on them and now we're going to be hard on them. Mr. Vickers, can you comment on that, please?
Through your worship, to Councillor Fowler, yeah, we are looking to adjust our hours of operation for the bylaw team this year. So we have, well, here's Mitch. Here, now you get the real deal now. But yeah, so we are looking at ways to be more aggressive and provide a greater coverage. But I'll let Mitch go.
Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Barry. Through your worship, just to add to Barry, one of the things we are doing in anticipation for support of this bylaw and other bylaws was adjusting our hours. So we do have bylaw staff later into the hours on Friday and Saturday, starting May 2-4 weekend. Along with back in November, there were amendments made to the noise bylaw in relation to a new offense being created for an owner causing and permitting noise that is persistent or unreasonable at any time, as well as an order section to the noise bylaw. So those are additional tools we have right now that we haven't had a chance to use, but we can use this summer.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. And if we defer this bylaw, those tools are still available to you?
Through your worship, yes, it is correct.
A point of clarification, just I understand that the thought process is that I am saying that we need more resources for bylaw. That is, I want to be clear, that's not. I know you guys are overworked and underappreciated by a lot of the town for the work that you do. What I'm trying to do with this is, instead of, if every time Mitch visited my house and I broke the law and I had to give him a $10 bill, I'd be like, okay, fine, I can eat $10. You know, I make enough, I work whatever jobs and whatever. But if Mitch comes up and all of a sudden it's like, yo, now it's 50, now it's 100, I'm going to start thinking. It's not the increase of the number of bylaw officers or resources we have. It's giving them better tools so they can enforce the rules accordingly. Hit the people where it hurts.
So Councillor Fowler, you're going to have to adjust it then, because you're saying existing tools. So now you're suggesting that you want staff to look into increasing fines.
Well, that's what I'm saying, to investigate existing tools. How would they can come back and say, okay, we've looked at this particular bylaw. This, the idea of increasing the fines would follow this pattern. Or, if we enhance the fines for repeat offenders who are known to be party houses with garbage, or the Clean Communities bylaw, or they have noise complaints, residual noise complaints, like continual. If we can say that, we can increase the fines as the problem continues to exacerbate the situation. If people aren't going to change, then we adapt and we increase the fines for them. If you're
Mr.
going
Harris,
to,
can you do that? Sorry to interrupt, Councillor.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Harris, is that doable?
Through your worship, yeah. So for part one fines, we can receive direction to increase the fines under our existing bylaws. We do have the option under our other bylaws as well as the bylaw before council for part three. So for more serious offenses or for repeat offenders where we return to the property night after night or maybe the next weekend, we could summons them to court. And in doing so, request higher fines from the court or probation orders and stuff like that.
And again, I hate to repeat myself, but is that tied to the bylaws that we're not going to pass tonight, or is that independent of that?
Through your worship, sorry if I understand correctly, yeah. So independent of the bylaw tonight, our existing bylaws have those tools.
Great. So Councillor Fowler, did you want to add that to the motion, that you want them to investigate increasing fines?
increasing fines for repeat offenders.
Councillor Waters.
I guess what we're still saying though is that whole home STAs are acceptable in residential areas, but all we're going to do is we're just going to fine you until it hurts. And what I'm saying is, why wouldn't we just try to take another tact, which this doesn't do anything for, is how do we stop whole house? Because it's affordability issue too, which I'm going after here, is that this STAs are moving affordable houses from the marketplace. And, so I'm hoping that this, by putting something here to have the staff look into, is the whole idea, how do we limit whole house STAs more than 180 days? Because, although Mr. Penticana had mentioned this, I don't think that still allows for 6 months solid people having it available to them. So is there another way? Like, I still keep on pointing to Blue Mountain in terms of what they did. It would be interesting to hear more be interested to investigate more of what they did, have staff look at that and see whether or not it's, because either way, we're going to end up in court on whether or not we pass all these or we go with an out-and-out ban on whole houses. So I'm looking at some way of asking staff to look into whole house, other ways of banning whole house rentals, STAs. So this does nothing for that. Thank you.
Mr. Gershaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I'd just like to advise council. My perspective is that it's a little risky to attempt to, wordsmith our way out of this, try to amend the recommendation on the fly, especially given the range of considerations, the range of concerns that have been identified. We're beginning to draft wording around a couple of specific issues that have been raised, but I think there's actually quite a number of comments that have been raised. And I'm also conscious of the fact that some members of council seem to be comfortable with the existing proposal that was on the table. So my suggestion, Your Worship, is that perhaps we should narrow this or bring this back to the question of deferral or not. Because if we want to look at these various options, we certainly can. It might be simpler simply to refer the whole package back to staff and allow us to report back at a future meeting.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gershaw. What I was afraid of doing, I'm happy to do that. What I was afraid of doing is having staff spend another year, 6-8 months, and then it comes back and we do the same dance. So I was just hoping that we could get some sense of where people wanted to go, so staff wasn't wasting their time. But happy to, if there's a motion to defer, then we can leave it at that. Deputy Mayor Davidson.
Thank you. I think it's pretty clear if we have a motion to defer. I think we've made our points very clear. We have bylaws in place. Let's enforce them. Let's increase the fine. Staff heard us loud and clear. That's what they can look at as well while this is being deferred. And we go to a zero tolerance policy. We let the public know that right away. And we're coming to get you. If you're going to break the laws, we're going to get you. And we're going to keep hitting your wallet where it counts. It's the only way they'll listen. So I put a motion forward to defer this and let staff come back and let's see what in the midterm period, what they tell us about our bylaws and the zero tolerance policy.
Councillor Waters?
Can we put a time limit on it so that, it's not a year down the road? Can we say, come back to us in 30 days? Because I see there's two things here. There's the existing bylaws piece in terms of making it hurt more. And the other one is around the whole house item. So there's two items we want them to look into to see whether or not they can come back with additions to the what they've given to us tonight. We're not saying we're scrapping the whole thing, but just take 30 days, come back to us with this, and make sure that we have a couple of weeks notice so we can take a look at the revisions, and we go from there and try this again in 30 days time. Because like I said, 6 months we won't be here. So if we have 30 days, 2 months, 60 days, something like that, at least there's a timeline on it, and it puts it back on our table again, and we have to come to some sort of resolution.
Follow up, Your Worship.
I just want to cover the 30-day issue, because 30 days means it's 2 weeks to get it on the agenda. But Mr. Gershow, is 30 days doable?
I was going to make a similar comment and suggest, a more a wider window, like Q2, for example, which takes us to the end of June, or something of that nature. I think we need a bit more time than 30 days.
Follow up, Worship.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Waters matters. I operate as a restaurant. I have a business license to operate as a restaurant. If I wanted to turn around tomorrow and operate, and this is your point you're trying to get across. If I buy a house and I turn it into business, bylaw is going to be on my doorstep. If I turn this restaurant into a brothel, bylaw is going to be on my doorstep. So we have a law in place, a bylaw now, that if you buy a house in a residential neighborhood, it's a residence. It's not a business. So we have that bylaw. Let's find out where these illegal ones are running. And like, I know some townhouses in Alcona have 3 floors, and it's 3 different sets of people every weekend on each floor. The neighbors are concerned. They're worried about who's coming every weekend. Is it a brothel? Who knows? We have one on the point. So we have bylaws in place. Let's give this back to staff. Let's defer it for 60, 70 days. So staff have ample time. But in the meantime, as Councillor Fowler said, let's take our bylaws and act them with zero tolerance.
Thank you. I don't want to go all over this again, but that's exactly what the Oro-Medonte issue was over. They're called ghost hotels, and that's that was the ruling. That was an overreach, that calling, not allowing rentals in residential neighborhoods was an overreach. So we actually don't have a bylaw right now that can, at least I don't think we have a bylaw. I'll ask Mr. Deloitte if we can, if we have a current way of just stopping people from what these ghost hotel ideas. Mr. Deloitte? Oh, he might be gone. I don't see him on here. Oh, no, there he is.
So, sorry, Your Worship. The current system we have in place would allow all manner of short-term accommodations throughout the city. So without any special regulations, that would continue. The Oro-Medonte situation is different and not determinate in terms of where Innisfil is heading. So any deferral would just leave that non-regulatory approach in place. And we'll get back to you as soon as we can with some suggestions, but we've pretty much given you our best advice tonight. So
thank you. I appreciate that. This is not easy, as you can tell. If it was easy, somebody would have figured it out by now and we'd all be copying them. But this is not, there's no easy fix to this. Mr. Gershow?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just now that I've had a moment to reflect on it, to perhaps make the recommendation more specific, there's a council meeting scheduled for June 22nd. That's the last one before our kind of summer recess, if I can call it that. That would be the last meeting in Q2.
So that's a suggestion for a report back date.
Thank you. So we have if you're agreeable with the recommendation, Councillor Fowler, you're still seen there as the mover, and I don't know if you have a seconder.
Deputy Mayor Davidson will second me. Where does it say here that we're investigating our existing bylaws? I don't see that in the recommendation. I'm just wondering how we can make, because I want to use the existing tools that we have, and I want to see how we can enhance them. Like at least investigate the option of enhancing them for repeat offenders. That's something I'm very clear about. If we are going to have somebody who's going to come here and not respect the laws that every tax-paying citizen is required to follow, then there has to be consequences for that. So there has to be something we can do about that.
I think that they can take that under advisement. We've been talking about it for 2 hours, and I think you've said it 6 times, so I think you got it.
I apologize. It's just something I'm incredibly passionate about, you know, and I take pride in serving the people of the city, and it's something I take very, very seriously.
Yes, I understand that. We all do. We all want the same thing. We just don't know how to get there, and neither does anyone else. But we're going to give it another crack. Mr. Jershow.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to comment on the text that appeared on the screen and then has disappeared. So I think no comment at this point.
Thank you. Motion to defer, or is that refer, defer? I guess refer, because it's back to council and it'll come back to us in June. All those in favor of that motion? Mr. Clerk, I might have done something wrong. Oh, it was a recorded vote.
To clarify whether you wanted a recorded vote on this referral still?
No. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So all in favor of deferral? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, everybody. Great discussion. That concludes the item. So we now have a rise recommendation. If I could have that moved by Councillor Orsatti and seconded by Councillor Waters. All in favor? That's carried. And then consideration of adoption of the recommendations from Committee of the Whole be moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favor? That's carried. And next we move to, there's a notice of motion, which we'll discuss on May the 11th. And following our notice of motion, we have announcements from members of council. Anybody have any announcements? Councillor Ices.
I lost my mouse. Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I had the pleasure of attending the Innisfil Historical Society's meeting last Saturday, and it was really a fun experience. Everybody was very happy to be out in a crowd again, even though there are still concerns over where we are with COVID. They had a great guest speaker talking about Timothy Eaton and his shopping enterprise over the years, and it was just a really good meeting, and it was good atmosphere, and I really appreciate what they do for the town with keeping our history alive. So.
Thank you, Councillor Ices. Yeah, I missed this one. I was at last month's, but it was the last virtual one. Councillor Wim Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to thank our staff for doing a great job, but the tea for the volunteers. It was great to see everybody there and mingling in person. That was the best part. So I really appreciate that and really thought it was well done. So I want to thank the staff for that. On another note is, and I just found out, but I guess it happened a couple of weeks ago, one of our people that worked for us, who was one of our managers, Carrie Columbus, passed away, and nobody said anything. And when I found out, it kind of bothered me because he was really a pleasant man to work with when he was here. And I just want to pass on condolences to his family. And I just wish I would have known sooner.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I didn't find out till after either, and very much too young. Very, very sad. Anyone else have any announcements? Seeing none, I hope that members of council have signed up for the Innisfil Car Rally over the weekend this weekend. And of course, one of my favorite days of the year is the opening of Lakeview Gardens. I can't wait. All excited. So now the confirming bylaw, and that would be moved by Councillor Nichols, seconded by Deputy Mayor Davidson. All those in favor? That is carried. And finally, we have adjournment, moved by Councillor Ices and seconded by Councillor Van Berkel. All those in favor? That's carried. Oh, and I should give you the time. It's 10:04. Great discussion and debate tonight. Some really heady issues on that agenda we had to get through. So I thought we did well to get out of here by 10 o'clock. I was thinking it was going to be closer to 11. So well done, everybody. Thanks for those who have joined us, and have a wonderful evening. Did I call all in favor?
We're all in favor of adjournment, Your Worship.
I didn't think I'd get any arguments there. Thanks, everyone.